everyone, and welcome back to the Adcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I'm your skater boy, Renu.
And I'm your cell at work, Soup.
This week, AD stands for Absolute Territory because we'll be wrapping up the winter 2021 season. But before we get into that, what have we been up to?
I have been up to, it's a good question. It's been like, I don't think it's been like a week since we recorded the last episode, if that. But actually, you know what? There are a couple of things that have happened since then. Right now it is currently Guild War in Grand Blue Fantasy, so I've sold my soul to the next couple days to endlessly fight a boss so that I can establish my dominance over other puny people trying to play this game.
It's all about the power fantasy, right?
Yeah, listen, the fantasy in Grand Blue Fantasy stands for power fantasy. I want power. I'm no longer baby.
No more baby.
No more baby. It's time for power. But aside from that, I've been doing a lot of, so what I should have been doing, right, is I should have been cleaning my room, because it's still not, like, organized from, when I moved all the stuff in here. So it's getting progressively worse, and I really do have to commit to cleaning it soon. But what I have been doing is I've been messing with keyboard stuff a lot, and I've completely gone off the deep end. It's over for me.
What?
So here's the thing. I mentioned this in a previous episode where, like, you start with keyboards as a hobby and you're like, yeah, it's like, it's cool. You can do all these things and you can try all these switches and they have all these, like, unique sound signatures and feels, and it's yeah, and all that's, like, fine and well and dandy, it's nice to have a good keyboard, right? To me personally, having a good keyboard is like having a good chair or like a good bed, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because at the very least, because I spend so much time on the computer, having a good keyboard and a good mouse is important to me, because it's the way that I interface with the thing that I spend 90% of my day looking at, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about keyboards as a hobby is that, like, they go a little bit into it, and, like, I will say it's not as as far as hobbies go, especially ones that have to do with, like, ways you interface with your computer. Keyboards, I think, are not nearly the most complicated. Like, it is complicated if you decide you wanted to, like, learn about switch actuation and, like, force, etc. Like, they have these graphs that tell you, like, just how much force it takes to, like, press a key, and all that is, like, completely unnecessary to the average person, or even to the, like, experienced keyboard person. Like, those graphs aren't really going to tell you that much unless you already have a baseline understanding of how those things feel. However, there is this is the thing about keyboards, right? Is that when you start getting into keyboards, the worst thing that can happen is you can get very accustomed to the very minute differences in things relating to, like, sound and, like, feel. So, for instance, many switches come, like, with a layer of, like, factory lubing, right? There's a lubricant on them to make them, like, slide smoothly, which, is pretty important. But the thing is that factory lubing, because it's such a, a mass production kind of process, many people are very unsatisfied with it. So what they will do is they will open the switches up themselves and take a little brush to them with some lube, and they will personally lube them by hand.
Wow.
And I was like, that's so much. That's a lot. Like, that's a lot of work. That takes that would take, like, hours.
Yeah.
And I swore that I would never become that kind of person.
I was gonna say, and now?
And here I am, and I've lubed 2 keyboards worth of switches. It's over for me. Oh my god.
This isn't ever anything I thought I would ever learn about or hear you say. Is I've lubed 2 keyboards now.
2 keyboards. I lubed 2 keyboards. Yeah, it's a lot.
Oh my God.
I mean, I will say there is kind of a nice, like, because it's a hobby, right?
Sure,
it's something
yeah.
that you decide to invest time in because you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the thing about keyboards, especially if you get into like looping switches, the one thing that I'm still holding off on, right? The one thing I have not committed to doing yet is soldering. I still have, I still firmly, I will not solder.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't trust myself to do that. But who's to say? I also like, the thing about hotspot boards, which is really nice, which is when a keyboard, you can just put the switches in and out of the keyboard and they work. Normally, traditionally, you've had to solder them in place, the switches. So, yeah, that's interesting. But like, it is kind of relaxing, I have to say. It's kind of like it's very much the same appeal as people who like paint models or do like Gundam building, right? It's just a very like it's a repetitive kind of thing you can do with your hands while you listen to a podcast or
yeah,
music.
I can see that. Yeah.
So that's been fun.
Okay.
I built an entire keyboard for my partner.
Oh, that's cute.
So that is what I've spent the last couple days doing. Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm still very happy with my keyboards. That now that I've kind of committed to doing that, they sound really nice and they feel really nice. So I'm glad I put the work in. It feels good.
Have you posted them up on like socials and stuff? I want to see
Oh
them.
no, I haven't. I
show
probably I probably could. I'll at least send you a picture. I might post them on Twitter later. I'll show you. My keyboard's not done yet because I have keycaps arriving sometime this month. I don't know when, but I do have keycaps that will come in and essentially complete my board, which will be nice.
Nice.
Yeah, because I've been waiting for a while now because everything in keyboards. This is the terrible thing about keyboards is that nothing is so easy that you can just buy it, right? Everything is like you have to commit to a group buy where you just like chip in your orders and your money, and then they make them all at once and they send them out, and it takes months. It's like I swear, building keyboard stuff, like enjoying keyboard stuff, feels like in many ways, it feels like you're kind of in the early days of like the train system or the horse mail system, right? Where it's like, yes, I have put my order in for a mail order keyboard part. It will arrive in 8 months.
Oh,
Exquisite.
No.
Yeah, it's everything takes so long.
Wow, I didn't realize
ridiculous.
that it took that long.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of like kind of readily available in stock things, usually here and there, but they're pretty few and far between, and usually they're very expensive, and not worth all the money that they're worth. So it's kind of a shrug emoji. But I mean, hey, I have absolutely, absolutely no disrespect, right, to somebody who decides to do that, because sometimes that really is all you can get. But yeah, so I've been messing with keyboard stuff, and I think the last thing that I really have to talk about is I am scheduled to get the vaccine.
Wow.
I don't remember which one it is, but I have made a schedule. I made an appointment through my my county's like healthcare services. So I will be getting that soon, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone else in my family has already had 1 or 2 shots. My dad just got his second one.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like California seems like one of the states that has the most availability in terms of the vaccine. We just made it available for everyone over 16.
Yeah, surprisingly, that's the same in Texas as well. They just made it available for everyone over 16. I was actually really shocked. I thought that it would take them longer for some reason.
I mean, yeah, right? Like, Texas is a big place.
Yeah.
I guess California's a big place,
California's
too.
big, too, but also California's, like, very different politically from Texas, so...
Yeah, honestly, I'm surprised that you're getting the vaccine at all with Mr.
I know,
Mr.
right?
Mr. Ted Cruz up there.
He's vacationing, so it's fine.
You're right. All of the lawmakers are like, all right, let's get this shit done while he's off. Yep, that's all I've been up to. Yeah. What about you?
Me, a lot of work. We are having our annual, everyone is under a huge amount of pressure because the big boss is mad at everyone meltdown.
Oh no. Oh, you hate to see that.
We do hate to see that. I think we've just cleared like the cusp of it, and now we're like starting new stuff. So hopefully we're fine. But like the past week has been like nightmarish. Like a lot of overtime and a lot of yelling and all that kind of stuff. You know, all the spicy stuff from animation studios, right?
Of course.
Yeah. But other than that, I also, in my very little off time, managed to beat Monster Hunter World, like 100%. Like
nice,
Iceborne
nice.
is completely done.
Hell
yeah. I'm trying to think, and I can't think of another final boss that I spent as much time cracking away at. It took me like I'd say a little over a week to beat him. Like
wow.
Just like a lot of attempts and me probably not being as good at the game as I should be by that point, you know? But yeah, no, he was a toughie, but a really cool fight, and
nice.
I highly recommend the whole Monster Hunter World plus Iceborne package to anyone who ends up getting into Monster Hunter.
I think Monster Hunter World is on PC now, right?
Yes, it's on PC now.
Okay. I might look to it, or I might just do Rise on the Switch.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Obviously, I mean,
yeah,
I'm not gonna pass up a chance to be like, all right, Renu, let's play some video game.
Yeah, that'd be so fun.
I feel like outside of Ace Attorney, we don't really play a ton of games together.
We don't, yeah.
We play very different kinds of games. Is why.
Yeah, though we do, like, you and I both like Fire Emblem and stuff like that. I'm just usually late to the Fire Emblem party.
Well, the thing is, we tend to like a lot of single player games, right?
That's true.
We don't converge a lot on multiplayer games. Yeah. I don't know what kind of multiplayer games you really play. I know that we had a brief stint where we played Final Fantasy 14 together, and you couldn't really find, like it didn't grip you, right?
It didn't grab me, yeah.
Yeah.
We played Divinity for a bit.
Yeah. We played Divinity until we got busy.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, I guess technically Stardew Valley is multiplayer now too.
Oh,
I do play that.
That's true. I've played a bit of multiplayer stuff. I've played very little Stardew Valley not in multiplayer.
Yes, me too.
It's actually very funny. Like, I actually know very little about the characters in the game outside of like what I've seen from just years of everybody having already played Stardew Valley and like everybody talking about it.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I feel like I just like don't really know how anything in the game works other than I plant the potato, I harvest the potato, I sell the potato.
Yeah,
I buy more potato.
Yeah, that is like the larger, I guess, gameplay loop, and then the smaller gameplay loop is like you wake up every morning, you water your plants, and then you go out and you do stuff, and that stuff can include like fishing. You can go down into the mines to fight monsters. You can go seduce the people in the village, like
yeah. I feel like it's the thing about Stardew Valley to me is it's the kind of game that I really want to enjoy. And there's a lot that I like about the game. I think that the gameplay loop of it is very good, right? Just the kind of routine of like getting up and like taking care of all your crops and stuff. And then just choosing what you do for the rest of the day. That's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I like the fact that the characters seem like pretty well thought out, and they have like relationships with each other, which is nice. I God, it's kind of like sometimes you forget that characters are supposed to interact with each other and not just like you, the player character. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Persona has this problem way too much.
Oh God, it
where
does.
It's like
yes.
nothing happens unless you, the main character,
Yes.
are there, even though these people are ostensibly supposed to be friends with each other.
Right. It kind of
Right.
makes me crazy whenever I notice that in a story.
Yeah. Well, that's why I really love the skit system in the Tales games. I think
I love
think that
those too.
every RPG should have that, right?
It's so fun.
And Bravely Default had that too.
Bravely
actually.
Default has it. Final Fantasy IX had it too. You could go into the little extra
Yeah,
cutscenes. Yeah.
But I think, like, overall, there's something that's missing to me about Stardew Valley, and it might just be that it's just not, like, anime enough for me, which sounds, like, so weird. But, like, I think when I play it, I'm just like, I miss Harvest Moon and Rune Factory.
I mean, that's fair. It's a different, I guess, style and different way of storytelling.
Well,
Maybe... Yeah.
The influence is definitely there. Like, this
Of
game
course.
wouldn't exist without, like, probably Rune Factory specifically. But it does have a lot of, like, you know, Western tastes kind of in it. I think a lot of it has to do with, like, the character archetypes too. In the game, I think that despite the fact that I think the characters are more or less pretty well thought out, and pretty well developed, I also just find myself kind of unable to really get myself invested in them. And I think part of it is also, it's just kind of like when everyone else has already played the game all the way through and they're like, oh, I've married like this person and they're my favorites to marry. And like, you know, your other friends are like, oh, I like this person and this person. One, you get a really good idea of their personalities. You're like, oh, I see.
You're that kind of person.
right. Yeah, you can immediately tell someone's tastes. But two, it's also just like it then makes it kind of weird, you know?
Yeah,
where I'm
it's
just
like, oh well, I'm gonna seduce your husband now.
I'm
Bye.
gonna seduce your husband now. Bye. Which, I mean, shrug emoji, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's something very weird about it to me.
Yeah.
And which is funny because like in real life, right? You know, it's like I'm not like a monogamous person. I'm not a strictly monogamous person. So it's like shrug emoji. Why is this weird in the game? It might be because only one, like, you can only marry one person in the game at a time. That might be it.
Really?
I think so. I don't think it supports polygamy. At least I don't think.
No, I mean, it doesn't, but like, I don't know.
I don't know. There's something about it.
I can understand that there might be like something that you can't quite quantify yet about why it hasn't grabbed you.
It might just be that it's like the fact that everybody else already knows these characters so well. It feels like I would just be playing catch up more than getting to experience it on my own. I think that's kind of it. I think that's like the root of it.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. That was kind of the same problem that I faced with Undertale because
Oh yeah, big problem with Undertale right now.
Yeah. So
for sure. Well, and the thing about Undertale too is I feel like if you knew nothing about Undertale, it's a great game.
Oh, absolutely.
If you know like a little bit about Undertale, it's still really good.
Yeah.
But I feel like, and I'm not, like, this isn't to say that it's a game that is ruined by spoilers, because I don't think it is. But I think that there is a difference between having something spoiled for you, against your will. Because, like, obviously some people are okay with spoilers. I usually don't really care about spoilers that much. And obviously, you know, this podcast is not a spoiler-friendly podcast, et cetera, right? But I feel like there's a difference between when someone spoils something in the story for you and when someone has a kind of like relationship with the game.
Yeah.
That is like when you see people are like, oh, this game like made me cry, like this game I really care about this game.
Yeah.
I feel like that can kind of be a double-edged sword, because it feels like if I go into it and I don't have the same reaction, I'm like, oh god, am I in the wrong? Like, am I experiencing this wrong?
Yes, absolutely. It sets up expectations for you regardless, and so it's tough because you kind of just have to at least for me, I know people who they just can't help but spoil things, or they'll unintentionally spoil things. And I'm that kind of person where I kind of want to form my own relationship with the media.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why, like, stuff like, we talked about our viewing experience with Parasite, and how you didn't really want to tell me anything about the movie, just that I should watch it. And I think that was probably, like, the best way for me to have experienced that movie, because I'm so grateful that I didn't know anything about that movie before going into it. Yeah. And I think I similarly, in retrospect, would have wanted the same experience with Undertale, and I kind of wish that I had just played the game when I had known nothing about it, aside from the fact that I should have just played it, you know?
Yeah. Well, there is also a difference between having something spoiled and having, like, the entirety of something, like, dissected and put before you, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, when you're spoiled on something, I think you can still enjoy it, right?
Sure.
Because,
yeah, I mean, it's still a good piece of media, regardless.
Right, exactly. Like, I think that surprise is an important, it is not the end-all be-all of storytelling.
No, absolutely
right?
not. Yeah.
And we've talked about it time and time again, where a show can have a very simple premise and a very predictable progression, and still be really good, and still make you care, right?
Yes.
But it kind of feels like, to me, when something like Undertale is, especially when you look at the kind of fan reaction to Undertale as a culture, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is, because Undertale is just it's a very limited experience. It's a fairly big game for what it is, right?
Yeah.
For, like, an indie release.
Yes.
But it is not everything, and it can't be everything, but that's what fan culture kind of makes things out to be. There is a trend where, basically, once people have experienced the story and they feel really attached to those characters in the world and everything, what they'll do is they'll remix it into something else, right? That, like, the idea of, like, fan fiction and AUs and all that stuff, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
But something like Undertale, because it's so big, it mutates a lot faster than smaller pieces of fiction, or like less popular pieces of fiction.
Yeah.
And you begin to get a kind of sprawl, right? There's a great Super Eye Patch Wolf video about the Undertale kind of fandom and its, like, fan works as a whole, and it's wild. There's, like, AUs, and then there's AUs of AUs, and then there's AUs of AUs of AUs, and then there's like compilation pieces where they mix a bunch of AUs together, and, like, it becomes less of its own experience, right? Undertale, if you know anything about it, it becomes less of its own experience and more of, like a lens, right? It's kind of like when you use something as a lens to approach other things.
Sure. Yeah. That's,
and, like,
wild.
I'm 100% super tangenting right now. I know, but yeah, I think that's kind of where I generally fall on that. Like, I'm glad I played Undertale pretty early on in its popularity.
Yeah.
Where I knew some about the game, but not all of it necessarily. I think nowadays it's really hard to one, avoid spoilers, obviously, but it's really hard to kind of both manage people's expectations about something, because if you don't like something that other people love, it kind of makes you feel like a bad person, right?
It makes you feel alienated, but also it kind of makes you dislike the media, not because of the media, but because of the people surrounding it. It's like, you guys are so rabid that you're making me kind of averse to this thing that I thought was, that maybe necessarily I didn't, hate or whatever, but now I'm kind of like, well, that's kind of how I feel about the Attack on Titan series. When I first watched it, it was before any of the hype had, like, really taken off, and I thought the show was fine. It wasn't like, it didn't blow my mind or anything, but it was just fine. And then all of the hype came out over it, and I was like, wow, this is kind of wild. And then it became like and then of course toxic fans come out, and then they're like, well, if you didn't like this part or that part, if you don't like my show or whatever, then you're wrong. Essentially.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, you don't want people to be like policing your experience with something, right?
Of course.
Like, and I think this is kind of part of at the core of spoiler culture, right? And it's something that people don't verbalize as much as like just saying like, I just don't like spoilers. I like having my own like experience with something. But that is something, right? The idea that you kind of want to go into something, because personally I think spoilers are just a neutral thing, right? I do think that the culture we live in overvalues like spoiling things. Like they put too much emphasis on like that being a bad thing. I think in the kind of like general space, spoilers are a neutral thing. You can learn about a spoiler and it'll be like, oh, okay, interesting, right? But some people really don't like spoilers because it hampers their ability to form their own relationship to a piece of media. And like this is just a thing that people like people naturally, I feel like, trend this way, where they like to be unique, where they like to experience something for the first time for themselves and form their own opinion about it, and they don't like when I guess like this is the like hipster kind of thing, right? Where like you want to be, you're like, oh,
Sure.
I like this before it was cool, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And subsequently, once it becomes popular, a lot of people will then switch sides and be like, actually, this sucks and I hate it, right? And like, obviously, that's a very childish like reaction to have.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But I think it is rooted in like a very kind of valid desire to want to not have your relationships or expectations of something or your experience of something be marred, I guess, by another person's experience with it, right? It's kind of something you hold like personally valuable to yourself. And like to me, even to me, right? Like so I have a very weird relationship with like analysis content, because on one hand I really like analysis content, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I love when people dive into something, especially something I'm interested in, and they talk about it and they like mention this and that and this. But I try not to watch analysis content for stuff that I'm going to talk about, even though I know that it would make my analysis of something stronger, right?
Right, like someone a little more informed.
Right, someone else's analysis will not ruin your experience with something, because if your experience with something changes, that's coming from you, right?
Sure, yeah.
But even then, like I feel like if I like watch too many, like for instance, if I watch too many videos about like Wonder Egg priority and like what every theme that means, like.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to just cite everything, even though technically, academically speaking, that's a totally valid thing to do.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is a balance to be struck where you want to be as informed enough to talk about things, but at the same time, you don't really want to just be parroting other people's points.
Yes.
And especially for the podcast, I feel like, because I feel like people tune into the podcast to listen to us talk about things, and not just us be like, oh, yeah, I watched a video about this and it was like this and this and this, right? It's like, just go watch the video yourself, right?
Right. You don't want it to be dry, but you also, it's not like we can't have completely, or rather, the idea of a completely original thought is like
it's totally
yeah.
like nothing, right?
Yeah, but also at the same time, if you have like an audience, or if you have someone that you're talking with and they want your opinion, you want some essence of like of yourself in there, right? You don't want that opinion to just be a bunch of other people's voices.
Well, yeah, like you want to have an opinion about something.
Yeah.
that you want to have an opinion of. You do not want to have that opinion spoken for by other people. And that's that's like at the core of what we've been talking about in relation to this.
Like, it can be validating if after you formed your opinion that you find that other people hold the same opinion, or maybe they might have different reasons for it, or they have different evidence, or you know, different information and whatnot. Or maybe they have differing opinions, but regardless, you have your original opinion, and then that can either hold or change or whatever. But it can be problematic if all you're doing is, rather than forming your own opinions, you are just taking other people's opinions, because there is like a level of critical thinking that goes into formulating your own opinion, you know, however much you might put into that. Yeah, it's I can completely understand wanting to value the formation of your own opinion before you seek out the opinions of others. Yeah.
But yeah, it's very funny that this all tangented off of like talking about Stardew Valley, but I feel that's generally how I feel about it. I think it's just I'm unable to enjoy that game in
that's fine,
in a way that is not kind of affected by the opinions of other people.
Yeah.
And some games, I think it is very possible to do that, but it's like what it does, because here's the thing about spoilers, right? Where people feel like spoilers will cheapen the experience of something, which I don't necessarily agree with, but like, I'm not going to tell people how to enjoy their media, and if somebody does not want things spoiled for them, I'm not going to spoil things for them, right? I mean, right?
Yeah. It varies depending on the media whether I'm okay with spoilers or not, and so that's why I appreciate,
that's 100%
you know,
true.
yeah, like people will be like, "Are you cool if I spoil this?" And then my answer will be like, yes or no. But like, when I'm really not okay with it is, I remember this happening distinctly, even though I don't have a particular attachment to this game. While I was playing Final Fantasy 15, there is a moment in the game where something very dramatic happens, and right before the reveal happened, my friend who was sitting next to me watching me play, she lent me the game, and so that's why she knew what was going on. She shouted what happened right before the reveal happened.
Oh,
and
no.
I got so upset.
Oh.
And it completely undercut the raw, I guess, emotion of learning what happened, because you're supposed to essentially, because your point of view is from Noctis's point of view, you know, he's your point of view character. You learn what happens as he learns it, but because she shouted it right before,
oh no,
you know, he did.
Yeah.
He learned it. I didn't. I got disconnected.
Yeah, that's it. It takes you out of the experience.
Yeah.
Well, because when somebody, especially, because okay, I think it varies from person to person, obviously. But when somebody tells you a spoiler, it does take you out of the story. You want to be as immersed as possible. As much as immersion is a thing, the jury's kind of still out on that, I think. And whether or not immersion is a valuable thing, but like there is, I think rather than immersion, it's best to think of it as this idea of suspension of disbelief, right? When somebody spoils something for you, especially something like right before it happens, it immediately like breaks your suspension of disbelief. And this goes doubly so, I think, for when a game is like I said before, like dissected and laid out before you. I think what that does is it changes your relationship to the text in a way where it transforms your relationship from you and a piece of media to you and the meta surrounding that media, right? And I think that like it's kind of this way if you were for instance to watch like analysis content of something without having seen the original thing, where your relationship to it changes, right? Because you have all of the stuff, the inner workings of it have been like laid bare and had a light kind of shined on and a microscope taken to it, right? And if you're very good at suspending your disbelief and experiencing media on your own terms, then that's not going to be a problem for you. But I think a lot of people aren't. And I would say that most people aren't, right?
I would say most people aren't too. Yeah. I can't even say I'm immune to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I watch an analysis video before experiencing the content, the analysis video is going to be in the back of my mind as I'm watching it. And I'll be analyzing the content as I'm going through to be like, oh, okay, so this was the point they were making about such and such, right? Well,
I also think that this is not, this isn't inherently a bad thing, though, I would say. Because I think that in some ways it can help you enjoy something more. It just depends on the thing, right?
It depends on the thing, yeah.
Like, if you just gave somebody a copy of Dark Souls, it probably wouldn't be super fun for them. But if you explained how to make Dark Souls fun to them, they would have fun with it, probably.
That's a good point.
Because I remember really bouncing hard off of Dark Souls the first time I tried playing it. Now, mind you, 95% of that was because I did not own a controller at the time, and that game does not, like, it technically works with a mouse and keyboard, but it doesn't work with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah.
But I remember the next time I tried it, I really did kind of get a feel for it, and I because I had experienced meta content about Dark Souls and about why it's good, because that was informing the way I experienced the game. It was making it more fun to me than if I had gone in blind, right? But obviously this varies from piece to piece, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I guess
we had a
getting
long
back
tangent.
to the very long tangent. It's been a while since we went on a really long tangent like that. Have you been up to anything else? Oh my god, it's been like 40 minutes.
Let's just talk about our topic at hand.
Let's just transition right in.
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with the stuff that we didn't finish. We did not finish Horimiya. I have read the manga for it, but I think there was one thing I wanted to mention about this show that I thought about and I wanted to mention in the sampler, but I forgot to because I didn't write it down. I was literally like, oh, I don't need to write that down. I won't forget it, right? And then I completely forgot it. And it was like, yeah. Anyway, Horimiya to me has always been a comfort like series. The manga has always been a comfort series to me. I like rereading it from time to time. But I think what I realized about Horimiya, and subsequently as a result, what I realized about romantic comedies as kind of a genre is they exist largely in what I would call a softer world. Which is like it is. It's funny because like when I think about like slice of life shows and the appeal of a slice of life show, like what I really want is I want a world that like I want an experience, right? The experience of mundane daily life where it doesn't feel like my life is at stake, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that low-key, everybody feels this, right? When they wake up in the morning, you feel a low-key amount of dread. Because you're like, oh, I have to go to work, right? I'm like consigning myself to doing like 8 hours of some kind of labor. Or,
you mean the birds aren't singing and you're like, oh
right,
yes,
exactly.
What a great day to be alive.
Well, this is the to me this is the appeal that people like in Ghibli movies is it's a very saturated like larger than life slice of life-ness, right? Where there's fantasy and fantastical elements, but a lot of the like quote unquote action in a lot of those movies is very like slow, like mundane stuff, like people eating food. People always talk about Ghibli food, right? And in a lot of those movies, the stakes are quite low. Like obviously, objectively speaking, like Ponyo, the stakes are not like low because like the world is gonna be flooded or something, etc., etc. Like there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but
I would
on the
argue
whole,
that like the stakes are very personal. It's not like
the stakes are very personal. Yeah,
the world isn't ending like in a Persona game, but
yeah, right.
but like Chihiro needs to get back to the quote unquote real world with her family, right? They got turned in her parents got turned into pigs, and then Nausicaa, the environment is getting hecky.
I feel like Nausicaa is kind of the exception to this rule. But like something like Kiki's delivery service.
Yeah,
where,
Kiki. Yeah.
There's like basically nothing at stake, right? But it's very compelling.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of it is because it exists in this idea of a softer world, which is at least to what I consider, right? It's a world where you can be hurt, and like grow, and it's like painful, but it's not like too painful, right? Because here's the thing about real life sucks. Real life sucks a lot. Like when something bad happens, that shit hurts, and you're like, oh god, I have to deal with this and go to work. Like, it's awful.
Yeah.
And like you wake up on the weekends and you're like low key feeling dread because you're like, oh, I'm gonna enjoy my weekend, I'm having fun. But in the back of your mind, you're like, in 2 days, I'm going to go back to work.
Don't narrate my life.
Yeah. And the thing about like rom-coms and like slice of life shows is that those stakes are, and this is the reason a lot of them take place in high school, right? It's a very like pivotal time in a person's life, but everything very important seems so far away when you're in high school. And what really is important and pressing to you at that moment is what you're feeling, and many times for many people that's like your relationships and your dokis, right? How you feel about other people, right? And there's an element of that I like, I love, where it's like people are falling in love and they are getting rejected, and it's not the end of the world. They can remain friends and they can move on, and like things change, and like maybe in the future they'll get together and be in a relationship or whatever, right? And like the kind of existential threat of labor doesn't exist nearly as like presently as it does. And I think this is the reason why you don't see as many slice of life shows about adult life, right? Like there's stuff like Wodokoi, which feels
Wodokoi
very
is
much
the big exception.
Yeah. it's like the big like one that everyone kind of thinks about. There's also what's that one? It's like Net Game o Susume or something.
Oh yeah. There was that one. There was also the one, the office worker one, where she has that one coworker who's always after. Oh, her name was like Lucy, but she had a really long name.
It was. I think it's not working. It's, I think, Servant X. No, is that it?
Yeah, is it Servant X Service?
Yeah, it's about the lady that works in like a government job, right?
Yeah.
Like a clerical government job. Yeah. Like there can be some comfort in that, I think, because most of the work is pretty low stakes or gets lighted away. But on the whole, people don't want to be reminded about work.
Yeah,
because it's awful, because it sucks, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree that rom-coms are designed to comfort you.
Yeah, right.
Take you out of the.
Because I think that when people think about like rom-coms, they like watching two people fall in love, and that's an enjoyable experience for them. But I think a larger part of why it's such a popular and like comforting genre is very similar to why slice of life is a comforting genre. I think that the idea of a world where pain is duller, is not felt as harshly, I think is very appealing to people. Because it's you know what it is? It's having a controlled emotional experience, which is what like good media is about, right? It's about having controlled emotional experiences in safe spaces, right? Like a horror movie will not hurt you. But people enjoy horror movies because they enjoy the feeling of being scared. of being frightened. I hate it, mind you, so I don't watch horror movies. But a lot of people do enjoy horror movies, and they enjoy that. I mean, like, people enjoy roller coasters because they kind of assume that they're safe, right? Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Oh man, I've been watching so many like videos about horror on roller coasters.
Did you watch the documentary about the action park in like New Jersey?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. One hopes that things are safe and that people have gone through the proper protocols, but whoever knows.
The person
really.
who was just like, bro, this is like someone who took Roller Coaster Tycoon and made it real.
Exactly. It feels exactly like that. None of that seems real. Yeah. So that's my like thesis about like a softer world and rom-coms, because I think getting hurt is a part of it, right?
Yeah,
not all
course.
rom-coms have people getting hurt, but a lot of them do have people experiencing, pretty like teenagers. They're experiencing pretty extreme emotional distress, but like in a way that that it won't hurt them, right? That it's going to turn out okay in the end. That's what I really love, I think, about Oregairu, or my teenage rom. I don't remember the actual English name of it, but Oregairu has the experience of a child, a teenager, who is essentially like kind of like a lone wolf incel, basically, and it's just about him like learning that he shouldn't just sacrifice himself to make other people happy, because in the end that misery will always kind of revolve and catch up. And I like it because he hurts himself. He puts himself in situations where he gets hurt because he feels like it will ease the pain of others, when in reality it's actually just hurting the people around him that have relationship with him and that care for him, right? And it's about him kind of learning to move past that into being not such a weirdo, right? Not somebody who is like, I'm going to predicate other people's happiness on my own misery, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting I guess premise, because it kind of explores a rather, like, if we were to interact with someone like that in real life, we would think that the way that they're acting is completely illogical. It's like, why would you be like this, Right. But being able to actually submerge yourself in that mindset and be like, okay, well, there is a logic to it. The way that this character like thinks and feels, maybe it's, we think that it's wrong, but to him, he thinks that it's right, and this is why. And it kind of helps you understand people a little bit better.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my bit on Horimiya. I 100% recommend people watch this, because it really is. It's kind of nice when something just skips over all of the boring bits, and Horimiya is like, what if we just skipped over all of the like waffling bits? Like, you don't want to watch that, do you? Good, me neither.
Oh, the waffling.
Now, I will say, I think there are places where the waffling bits are the fun parts, and a lot of shows, a series are like that. Actually, it's a concept that I learned recently is a concept in like Japanese literary analysis called like junai, or pure love, where like as a genre, like junai is about the process of getting into a relationship and not about the relationship. I like that Horimiya is about the relationship, and like, spoilers for what happens in over the course of the show. It's very realistic about what teenagers are like they have sex. Which is like, I mean, obviously they don't show it, but like, I mean, sometimes I feel like when we watch like Japanese like anime, you kind of forget that like teenagers are just banging all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely. So one of the first, I guess, rom-coms that I ever read was Karekano, and there's a moment where they are teenagers and they consummate their relationship, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, it feels so weird.
Yeah, no, I was a teenager at that time. I was their age, and I was like, oh my God, what are they doing?
Young Renu was like, you can do that?
Yeah, I was like, Even though I knew, obviously, people in my school, of course, were doing
I mean, of course, right?
Yeah, but I just wasn't expecting it out of my rom-com teenage romance series.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a big thing about, like, junai, right? Where junai in Japanese means, like, pure love. So it's like, it is this idea that a love is pure and unsullied by adult desires, right? Which is, like, obviously kind of nonsensical, right?
Yeah.
Like, when it really comes down to it, like teenagers, my god, teenagers. Holy shit, teenagers. Oh my god, right? Anyway, sometimes when you watch too much anime, you forget, oh, that's right. Like, real people exist out there, and they probably bang a lot. and it's part of being in, like, in the space of a conservative culture where you kind of forget sometimes that, like, not everything is as, like, weirdo brainworms as, like, your government tells you that it is, where it's like, oh, right, because, like, we have the same exact thing in America where, like, our media obviously has been, quite decadent, I should say, for quite a long time. But there was this very prominent period between, like, 1935 and, like, 1990 where movies just, like, couldn't do anything, right? Because of the Hays Code, right? Because of the moral restrictions put upon them by Christian society, right? And, like, we still have a lot of lingering kind of resentment and malice towards sex as a thing. Like, we live in a very puritanical culture, even though we like to think of ourselves as very liberated, right? Like, the fact that, you know, it's still very difficult to talk frankly about sex everywhere in the country, and like, the fact that like, sex work is seen as, like, a very, like, nasty, morally wrong thing to do, when in reality, like, it's just a job, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's just a job.
Because, like, when you think about it, right? When you think about, like, sex work, right? It's like, oh, sex is only something you should do for love or baby making.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's nonsense, right?
No.
Like,
no.
like, oh, you're ruining your body. It's like, no, that's like, do you know what's ruining people's bodies? Working hard labor for 12 hours a day. I swear that will ruin your body way faster than just having a bunch of sex. Right? And, like, obviously, like, we should recognize that it's, like, not all fun and games. It's work.
Yeah, it's work.
Like, people think it's easy, but it's work.
Yeah.
But then again, like, it's one of those weird spaces where, like, Japan, I feel like, does not have as much of a problem with it as, like, America. Because, like, in Japan, it's kind of like a hush-hush issue where, like, with prostitution and, like, relationship prostitution, I don't actually know what it's called, is like a thing, where like, you can actually go out and you can, like, rent somebody to be your friend for, like, an hour. Like, in a weird way, Japan actually recognizes that, like, emotional labor is labor. And that's, like, fascinating to me, because, like, I feel like we don't think about it like that in the West, when in reality, like, I mean, yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could just hire someone to be your friend for, like, an hour? I feel like as long as people don't get too weird about it, like, that's at the end of the day, right?
I think Japan, even though both Japan and the US are they're both pretty conservative countries, Japan is very open about like work, like jobs, I guess, like forms of occupation.
Yeah, it's a very like, I think it's because it places so much emphasis on, like, service as an industry.
Yeah.
Whereas we kind of think about service as a byproduct of industry, I think. Because, like, when you think about it, like, people in Japan are essentially, like, servers in Japan are, like, paid to be, like, very, very nice to people. But they're paid in a way where they don't need to accept tips. Whereas in America, we just expect people to be, like, really nice and wait at us hand and feet, and then we might pay them a pittance.
Right. Yeah.
it's we have very different relationships around like service as an industry, I think.
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I don't remember how we got onto this topic.
Anyway, Horimiya is a very cute series.
Sex. Yes, it's a very, very good romantic comedy about teenagers, and it's very realistic about the way teenagers engage in relationships, which is to say, it's not just like, you know, once we get into a relationship, that's it, we're done.
That's the end of the series,
life, right?
yeah.
That's the end of the series. Like, there's nothing more past this. We don't have to concern ourselves, right? It's about like the trials and tribulations of a young couple navigating their relationship, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like Horimiya. It goes some weird places, I gotta say. Like later in the later chapters, it goes weird places.
All right.
But I mean, whatever, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this is a comfort series of mine. I like this a lot. I probably will go back and watch the rest of the show itself so that I can talk about the merits of the show on its own terms. But yeah, as far as the story goes, Horimiya's.
I think being able to look at how they adapted it would be interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of adaptations,
yeah,
let's talk about The Promised Neverland Season 2, which did you finish?
I finished it.
Okay, yeah. I didn't, but I have read the manga. But
yes, we both have very different information.
So we did watch together the episode where the timelines diverge, essentially. And,
yes, we did.
Before we continue, it is worth noting that the creator of the manga was closely tied to the production of the anime. And the decisions that were made. That being said, it was very weird decisions that were made.
Yeah.
Okay. I need you to just really quickly, I just need you to recap what happens from where we left off to like the end of the series. Like what happens in those 6 episodes.
Okay, so we left off after the Norman reveal, right?
We watched one more episode, I think, where Emma goes to the hideout and they meet the genetically modified kids.
Okay, so Emma basically tells Norman that she's against everyone against killing all the demons, right? And Norman's like, all right, well, what do you want to do? And then she says, well, I know of this girl named Mujika, and she has this blood or whatever. I think Norman ends up telling her about what Mujika can do, like her abilities and stuff, because he's heard of her before. And so basically they end up striking a deal where he promises not to go forward with his plan to kill all of the demons, and in exchange Emma will bring back Mujika to Norman, and then that way they can solve the demon problem with her blood. And so he gives them 3 days to do so, and so they leave to go find Mujika, and then in the meantime Norman's like, well, I'm gonna go ahead with my plan anyway. Yeah, and so by the time that Emma gets back, the village is like on fire, and all the demons are mutating, or they're reverting or whatever. And it turns out that the old man, did you see that part with the old demon man?
Yes.
Okay. The old demon man has the same blood as Mujika, and so he uses it to save his child, who is also coincidentally named Emma, from transforming. And so Norman was about to kill them, but then he hears that the girl's name is Emma, and he's like, and he hesitates, and then he sees.
Oh my! What? No! Wait. Are you telling me that season 2 of The Promised Neverland pulls a Batman vs Superman?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Oh. What? Okay, all right. It's not as out there as. Okay, it's not as out there as that, but
no, it's not quite that bad. Yeah,
I think,
but
that
it is
is
like
better
symbol,
set up, but like
yeah. It is
my
a thing
God.
that happens. So while he's debating about whether to finish them off, Emma comes back with Ray, and they interrupt Norman essentially, and they manage to convince him to knock it off. And
Okay.
and afterwards they end up essentially working together. Mujika is there. They manage to bring her to the village. She goes around distributing her blood in order to save the remaining demon folk. It gets revealed as Norman is talking with Emma and Ray and about what happened and stuff, that Norman is dying because of the experiments that were that were placed on him, or that he had to go through, everything that he went through at the facility and all that. And they find information from Minerva that contains like a cure for Norman's ailments and stuff.
What?
and for the other folk in their group. And so it's like they're saved, and also they find information about how they can head to like the main facility and stuff. And so I'm kind of like really roughly glossing over this because they go over it really fast, and so I only remember so much, right? So my apologies if I get any of this incorrect. But they form a plan together about how to infiltrate the main facility and how they're going to save the other kids, because they find out that the kids are going to be moved as a result of the attack on the demon village. And so the Gracefield kids are with Phil and everyone, and they're about to be moved when Emma and them implement their plan. There's like some hot air balloons involved. They manage to deceive all of those armed soldiers into thinking that they're on those hot air balloons, but really, they're not. And they manage to free all the children and bring them along to the main, I guess, facility. And then you find that Isabella is there with all the other moms. Isabella's the grandmother. She's been promoted. And they come across the head honcho of the facility, the Peter Ratri. And you then find out that Isabella has actually been supporting her children this whole time and convinced all the moms to come over to their side. And so then all of the moms and Isabella turn on Peter Ratri with their machine guns and stuff, and they're pointed at him. And Emma tries to beseech Peter into coming over to their side as well. And and then the very last episode is essentially a very minimally animated exposition dump about the Ratri family and how they, how Peter's older brother is Minerva, or was Minerva, and how the reason he became Minerva was because he learned about the deal that their family had struck about betraying about how the children were related to the founders and how they were betrayed, and that's why they struck this deal, right, where about the human world and the separation of the human world and the demon world. And so Peter ends up killing Minerva, or his brother, because of this, because Peter's like, but the deal is good, like, these sacrifices have to be made for peace or whatever, like, well, I don't see the problem here. But Minerva was working against that and wanted to free the children, and so that's why he was killed. And he decides that he's not going to work with Emma and the other kids because he's not convinced. He's sticking to his convictions, and then he takes out a knife and he offs himself. because he would rather die, you know, sticking to his convictions as a Ratri. Then Emma and the group decide that they're going to go to the human world with all the mamas. They manage to convince the moms to come with them. And as they're crossing the giant metal doors that honestly reminded me of the Full Metal Alchemist doors, you know? They're going to the light, the white light. Emma, Norman, and Ray, and Norman's, you know, his group from the facility, they all decide to stay and basically keep anyone who might be pursuing them away from the children. And also, they say they basically still have some work to do in the demon world. And so they send everyone else off into the human world. It is revealed that the human world is modern day developed like New York City, essentially. And so the kids like start going to school and stuff, and they're all like living like a peaceful life. And meanwhile, Emma and them are like trekking through the demon world. They very briefly mention stuff that happens in the manga, like the queen and the gods and stuff like that. But it's glossed over basically like with images, you know, like you see them climbing over a mountain, you see them meeting the god, you see them like, it's just like, you know, images. And, and then at the very end, Emma and Norman and Ray, after their work is done, they come over to the human world and they reunite with Phil and the rest of the children. And that's the end of the anime.
I can see why people are upset now.
Yeah.
So okay, all right. I want to give you a little bit of context, right?
Yeah.
So the Promised Neverland season 1 covers chapters 1 through 37.
Yeah.
Season 2 covers 38 through 181. Oh my god!
Yeah, I read. I did do some reading about like what the differences were in the manga and the anime, just to get some context about it.
So, I won't spend too much time talking about the manga, obviously. But there are things that I obviously have not experienced in the anime yet. But one, that's way too much to fit into one.
It was a whole lot, yeah.
I don't understand why they decided to cram it into a second season.
I don't know.
I have to assume they only got greenlit for 2 seasons, and they were like, well, I guess we don't want to leave season 3 in pending hell, so let's just do the whole thing.
Sure, yeah, I would imagine. Mm-hmm.
And I get that, but also, okay, here's me being generous to the anime, right? I think that what happened here is that the producers of the anime and the mangaka decided to essentially center the Gracefield House children, right?
Yeah.
Because in the manga, a lot of stuff happens, and there are so many characters. Like, there are actually a ridiculous amount of characters that appear and like have their whole shtick. But at the end of the day, it is about the kids, like, you know, Norman, Ray, and Emma, and like who they kind of turn out to be. One thing that I will say that I wish was better in both the series and the manga is I think that Norman and Emma take really, really they become very cool characters in opposition to each other, where Norman wants to go ahead with his plan at all costs, and Emma wants to go through with hers, and they grow into characters that are opposed to each other, even though they want to be together, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like as a result, Ray kind of gets left behind as like he stops kind of developing like halfway through the manga, really.
Right.
And it feels like there could have been something else done with Ray to be more interesting. But
sure,
like,
yeah.
Putting all that aside, I think the thing about the Promised Neverland season 2 is it sounds a lot like what they wanted to do is they wanted to stick more to the vibes and themes of the first season, because I will say that in the manga, after they get to the underground hold, the tone changes a lot, right? Because it stops being a like suspense, like a suspenseful like horror kind of psychological manipulation game kind of vibe, and becomes a lot more of like a very action heavy series. I think it's really cool, but I can also see why some people think even like in the manga that those early chapters were better than the later ones. I like that I like the direction that the manga went in. I like the course the story took, and I think it establishes emotional connections and does really well by the characters that it does introduce, even if those characters are like there are a lot of them. I will say it does baffle me somewhat that they decided to try to cram the entire because it would be one thing if you had if you had a whole story and you had a third of it in the first season and 2/3 of it in the second. Like that's, you can do that, right? It's possible.
Sure.
When you have like one, oh god, what is the fraction? It's like 3/18 is one. If you have a ninth of the series as the first season, and then 8/9 as the second, like there's no way it's gonna feel like satisfying anyway. Like there is.
Yeah,
I truly believe that there is no way you can effectively develop that story.
I was so shocked that to learn as I was finishing up season 2 that they were wrapping the whole story up, because it didn't feel like that was appropriate to the story at all.
I was wondering. So while you were explaining the synopsis, I was wondering, because I was like, surely what they did was they just skipped the action park, or not the action. Fuck, that's a very different thing. It's basically the same thing, actually. I don't remember what the arc is called, but the park arc is one of the coolest actually in the entire series. So it's a shame it got cut. And they introduced one of the best characters too, who is like an adult person, who is in the underground hold, which is like, I read that in the manga and I was like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, I heard about that.
Like,
that was the like initial disappointment and shock, was like people
was that character wasn't
that
there,
character wasn't there. Yeah, and they instead showed very deliberately that they were going in a different direction after that episode.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I think that it's one thing to try to fit like a lot of story in a short amount of time. I think it is possible to develop a story that works very efficiently. I think that Demon Slayer works very efficiently in that the storytelling overall skips over kind of anything you don't really need. It trims all the fat off. But I feel like this is going a little bit far, and I feel like because when you were giving the synopsis, I was like, there's no way that they're going to finish the series in this season.
Yeah.
Surely what they must be doing is they must have mapped out 3 seasons and realized, oh, okay, well, we probably can't fit all of it, so we're gonna cut like, you know, a good like 30, 50 chapters, and then we're going to be able to finish in 2 more seasons. And that was not the case. They decided to fucking they're like, all right, we did it, we're done.
They cut all of it. Yeah, no, they essentially they decided to summarize it. Yeah.
There's no way that any of that could be developed properly in that short of an amount of time.
No, and I do wonder, like, I understand because apparently, like you said, the later parts of the manga were rather divisive. Like, some people liked it, some people didn't. And especially, like, the ending of the manga as well. And so, hearing that the creator was involved with season 2, and seeing the way that it was diverging, it felt like maybe it could have been an attempt to kind of remedy those
that's what I suspect.
Points.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is, like, they clearly didn't have the budget or the time to basically rewrite the whole story in a way that felt appropriate and that matched the pacing of the first season and kept while keeping the second season cohesive, because the pacing just goes completely out the window in the last 3 episodes. It's to the detriment of the entire story. And if you are going to take a different approach to the story and just make the anime completely separate from the manga, that's totally fine. That is your freedom to do so, but the story still needs to be good, right?
Yeah,
even if it's going to be different.
It is one thing to take creative license with an adaptation. It is another thing entirely to, like, not be able to commit one way or the other and just end up with a mess.
Yeah, it just, like, I don't know how the manga approaches Emma's character, I guess, like, throughout the whole series or whatever, but kind of towards the end of the anime, she just kind of became, like, a saint-like problem solver magician. Like, she would just speak the word and things would happen. Aside from, like, Peter's development, where he's like, no, heck you.
Heck you.
Every time she got involved, people were rather easily convinced, right, to join her side. Even Norman, who did end up going through his plan anyway, afterward he was convinced to join her side pretty easily. Yeah, so I think, okay. I will say that that is a much smoother transition in the manga, where a lot of those middle chapters, Emma has a lot of trouble trying to get people on her side. And those chapters are very important for the development of both the world and the characters. And it's kind of a shame, because, like, it would have been awesome to see that arc animated. But I mean, like, you know, can't say anything. But, like, regardless of if you take a different direction, like, what you should be doing isn't trying to condense the latter half of, the latter half, the latter 8/9 of the story into a single season, right? It's not even, it wasn't even a 2-part season. It was just one season, right? It was a single, like, 12 episode season to fit, like, 150 chapters of a manga, which is, like, that's bonkers. Yeah,
There's no way you can do that.
It wasn't, like, if they were going to go into the re-adaptation or just, like, the adaptation route different from the manga, they should have leaned way heavier into it instead of just trying to condense everything at the end of the series. What
they should have done is they really should have just hard committed to, like, 1 or 2 things, develop them, and then end the series, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I know this is a lot easier said than done, especially with a story like that sprawls this much.
Yeah.
But those chapters are essentially to the development of the stories and the characters. Like, there's real character development that happens in those chapters, and you can't just cut that out and then not replace it with anything and assume it works, right? It is one thing to skip the boring parts by shortcutting, especially if it's something that is something people are familiar with, right? Like, if you skipped a training, like, montage, or you montaged a training sequence even, right? People understand what that's supposed to mean. They understand what happens in that gap, but the same. But
they
does
montage
not go.
The entire
right. The same does not go if you montage your character development.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine what it would be like if Avatar: The Last Airbender was only, like, 2 books long?
Oh my
right?
god!
If it was only 2 books long, and then, like, between seasons 1 and 2, they just montage Zuko's entire character arc. You'd be like, what the hell?
No, they would have had the montage, like, all of book 3 and 4, and then also half of book 2. Like,
right.
It just,
exactly.
Like, it would be crazy. Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened. And I wonder, I'm so curious about the production of this season and how it went down, because the first few episodes felt like it was on track, right? I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't as, I guess, as compelling as the first season, but it felt like it had its own mood and pacing to it, and I was super down. And then, I'm wondering how much of the production, because they produce it week to week, how much of it was like a response to like fan backlash about how the show was going, right? Like how much of this was actually thought out beforehand and how much they committed to that versus how much they might have produced in response to people being upset.
I have no idea. I would also be very curious to know, because it's very rare that you see an adaptation that is so like widely disregarded as terrible, right?
Yeah.
Everybody hates this, and like I feel like it's one of those situations where it's hard to justify it, because even if the original creator is involved and decisions were made and creative license was taken, it wasn't to make anything that like felt like anything.
Yeah, essentially.
Right? Like, you can't just take all the substance out of a creative work and then say, yes, I have. It's just an adaptation, right? So you're gonna start to wonder what's happening. And it's such a shame, because I think The Promised Neverland is a really, really great manga. Actually, what I noticed about when I read through it is that the art is very it has a graphic novel vibe to it, like sometimes more so than it has a manga vibe to it. The artist for The Promised Neverland is a very proficient illustrationist.
That artist is a huge concept artist, actually. Like their work is very grounded in that.
If you look at the cover pages, they're beautiful, and they look so different from like even the manga, really. They're almost in a different style than the manga is. And they really show off like what like the skills of the artist, and it's kind of amazing, actually.
Yeah.
But unfortunately we don't get to see any of that in the anime.
Yeah, I guess like TLDR, maybe just read the manga for Promised Neverland. If you want to read
probably just read the manga. The first season of the anime is
great.
stellar. It is stellar. It still holds up.
Yeah. If you watch the first season and you're like, I kind of hear iffy things about season 2, it is definitely iffy. As someone who didn't read the manga, I would say that the second season is very flat, like pretty mediocre.
Yeah, it just doesn't really feel, and obviously, like, I didn't watch it, but it's from what you've said and from what other people have kind of reacted to it as such, it feels very hollow. It feels like there's not a lot going on.
Like, I'm not angry like a lot of people might be. It is hollow, and so I feel empty after watching it.
Yeah. Which is such a shame, because you're already so invested in these characters.
I love the characters.
Drops off a cliff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
My recommendation is it's totally okay to watch the second season of the anime right up until they get into the bunker, and then just turn it off and read the manga. Yeah. Everything kind of changes after that, pacing wise, content wise, everything, and not necessarily for the better. Everything with everything in the early episodes with like Sonju and Mujika, very cool. Yep. I also, like, it's such a shame because some of the best characters show up or get introduced in the it's like Wonderland Park or something. I think that's what they call it. In that arc, and like when things happen later, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna speak too much on the manga because obviously, like, that's not the topic that we're gonna talk about here, but. Very, very cool. Read the manga and not the anime. And I feel like it just reminds me of a lot of the days when I was like reading a lot of books and I watched the movie adaptations and I was like, oh, this sucks. Boo. Right? At the end of the day, people will never be perfectly happy with an adaptation. They will always see something that they're like, oh, this could have been better. This could have been better. This could have been better.
Of course.
I mean, unless you're talking about the second half of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, but like, not everything can be the second half of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Not everything can be Full Metal Alchemist, period.
Like... Not everything can be Full Metal Alchemist. Some things are only Full Metal Alchemist 2009.
Like, literally, I was watching, like, as I was watching...
was it 2006? No, wait, that's the Fate adaptation. Never mind.
Yeah. as I was watching the season 2 and I saw the Full Metal Alchemist doors, I was like, man, I wish this was as good as what they
Right.
did with Full Metal Alchemist.
Well, that's what works so well about Full Metal Alchemist is that it is like 64 episodes long.
Yeah, exactly. They had time.
And each episode is a fucking banger. Yeah, no, it's God, yeah. It's Promised Neverland season 2 could have been much better.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. Just
Yeah,
read the manga.
it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a shame because like all of the things that happen at the very end of the series is this like beautiful like rolling like inexorable crescendo, this like climax that happens that takes parts from like every single thing that's happened, right? Like the reveal where Isabella it has like turned on the like farms and has gotten all the mothers to rebel with her is very cool in the manga because there's a lot of like cuts where Isabella is like promoted to grandmother and like chapters devoted to like her, right? And all of the other mothers being like being like, oh man, Isabella, she thinks she's so great, etc., right? All of that becomes very like it's rewarding when you go through the effort of reading through everything when things come back up. Like it's like one of the very like basics of like manga storytelling where like these like cycles, right? These like recurring things, when things come back and like readers are familiar with them and they care about them, the impact is much larger. So if you forgo all of that, then none of it is gonna feel like anything, which is just
Right,
such
yeah.
a shame.
Yeah.
Anyway, we gotta move on. I did not watch this, but I highly recommend that you should watch the second season of Yuru Camp.
I watched it. Oh my gosh. I also highly recommend it.
Hell yeah.
It of course maintains the beautiful like nice pacing and music and scenery from season 1, but it explores some interesting like in-depth, I would say, I guess like philosophy behind camping. Why different people might like it and different reasons how they might approach it and what they would do while camping and stuff like that. And it also explores more of the girls' relationships with each other and their friendships and how they're just like their group camping dynamic. So it like takes season 1 and expands on it in a nice way. So if you like season 1, definitely I highly recommend season 2.
Nice. I'm definitely gonna go back and watch it 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Speaking of seasons 2, I did not finish, but we did watch a considerable amount of Cells at Work season 2.
Yeah, we did not finish it.
But yeah. I mean, it's not the kind of show you have to finish, really.
I want to though, because I think I want to see how it develops, like what it's gonna do with like I guess the climax of this season. You know, like how they're gonna
that's fair.
go with it. Yeah.
Now I did almost finish Cells at Work Code Black, and
oh my god, I really want to talk about this with you. Yeah.
Like, what? Okay, so here's the thing. Cells at Work is a very cute edutainment show.
Yes.
Right? You learn things about cells. They're like gajinked, like anime characters, so they're very cute and they interact and you're like, oh haha, that's funny. Renu gets a lot of enjoyment because she already knows all these things about the body. And Cells at Work Code Black is Cells at Work but edgy, but weirdly Cells at Work Code Black actually develops its own identity.
Yes.
Becomes its own like narrative.
Yes.
That has progression and like character development and is satisfying to watch, and I legitimately got emotional watching some of the episodes.
Oh my god!
What is happening?
What a left field turn for this spin-off!
Oh
it is
my
so,
god!
Like when you first start this, like I would say, like the first half of the season, right? For Code Black, you're like, okay, well, it's the edgy cousin of the original Cells at Work, but then it gets into the deep narrative stuff towards the end of the season, and you're like, oh, no, I wasn't expecting to feel things about these cells.
Well, look, because okay. The thing is that Cells at Work is like Code Black. It feels at the very early episodes feels like a very like black comedy. It's like very dark humor.
Yes,
it's like everybody's overworked all the time. Like everything sucks. Like the body is like on its way down. It's on its way out. And and then and then like you start getting attached to the characters because they like go through a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
and like. Then there's an episode where like the best friend character gets like addicted to caffeine and he almost gets flushed out of the system, and like he holds his hand out to grab him and it's just like, we're bros forever, and you're like, oh my god. And then later, the last episode I watched is the one where he was like getting overworked. He's just like, you gotta slack off, man. Like, and he's just like, no, fuck you. I'll do what I want. Like, why do you care? He's like, because you didn't leave me. And you're like, oh my god! Oh!
That's the last episode that you watched?
That's the last episode I watched. You just don't expect the emotional beats to hit.
It's so good. Like, you can legitimately see, like, you actually see these kinds of things in an abusive work environment where the workers get so brainwashed by like this constant narrative of the company's gonna fail, the world's gonna fail unless you keep working, unless you meet your deadlines. And that's what ends up spiraling for the main character, is that he gets into the state of mind, and then it takes his friend, whom he had saved earlier on, to kind of like be like, yo, like, you gotta take a step back. And they kind of balance each other out. And it's so crazy how much that translates to actual work.
Yeah.
But also just like actual relationships in general. Like sometimes your friend gets caught up in it and you gotta bring them back. And then you get caught up in it and they gotta bring you back.
Yeah. Go on.
I'm just gonna say, like, definitely keep watching because they keep developing that narrative to the end, and I would say the ending is really, really good. Shockingly good.
I was not expecting because my expectations for Cells at Work Code Black was like it was gonna be structured like Cells at Work.
Yeah. Your expectations are pretty low, like low stakes.
It's like obviously the stakes are a little higher. Everything's a little bit more grindy, a little bit,
right, exactly.
But like, I expected it to be like a Monster of the Week show, and it was for quite a large, probably about half of it. And then like all of a sudden, you then realize, oh wait, hold on, we're hitting a narrative. Wait, hold on, I care about these characters. Wait, what is happening?
They start building on things previously set up, and it's like, but I wasn't expecting this. I was just expecting things to just reset every week.
Yeah, like there's narrative progress that happens, and you're like, huh.
It's huge. Oh man, it gets huge later on too. So
it's and like the thing is that I was not expecting this show to be like a kind of a prescient or an accurate, I guess, piece about like what it feels like to be working like in the drudgery of like of an abusive company in the midst of an environmental meltdown.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. I expected it to kind of just be like almost like an AU, right? Where it's just kind of, okay, well, it's like these characters are put in a different universe and then they're under different conditions, but things are generally like, they'll work out, or the pacing or, the feel is very different, but the general pacing is going to be very similar, but no, it's,
well, it's interesting because it becomes this story about like the world and about environmental collapse and like the sort of the responsibility that we kind of all feel towards that, but our inability to do anything about it. Like,
yeah.
It's like you have to just continue to do what you're doing, despite the fact that things outside of your control are just continually getting worse, and you can feel them getting worse, and you can feel the impacts that they're having, right? What the fuck? Like,
yeah, the second half of this show,
shockingly good metaphor.
Exactly, it's shockingly good,
quite naturally, and what?
Yeah, you don't expect it out of the show, but my god, the second half is like mind blowing. Like, oh my god, they're really making some insightful commentary here.
The second half of the show is a banger.
Yeah.
Like, low key, it's really good.
It's really good. I was really surprised. I was like, oh my god, I can't stop watching. I gotta binge the rest.
Well, because I was like, so today, I was busy most of the day, right? I went grocery shopping. I cooked a nice, lovely dinner for my family. And then I came over to my shed. I trundled over, and then I was like, I should probably watch an episode or two of extra anime, because I finished Sk8 and I finished One Direct Priority.
Yeah.
More on those two shows later.
Yeah.
But I was like, I should probably finish something, or at least try to get a couple more episodes in of something. And I chose Cells at Work, Code Black, because like we were just the most progressed in that show.
Yeah.
When we left off, and the 2 episodes I watched, I was like actually really invested, and I was like, I care a lot about what's happening right now. I care a lot about what's happening right now. Like when they feel the despair and they see the the state of the world, you're like, oh my god, my heart. And then when they like take a break and they see the beauty of the world continuing without them, I'm like, oh my God,
right?
the beauty of the world.
That part really touched me. I was so moved.
I was not expecting starting today to get emotionally invested in Cell Gajinkas, but here we are. So Cells at Work Code Black weirdly is not just like edgy Cells at Work. It's like Cells at Work, but like with a narrative, like a through line narrative. And
it is crazy. Yeah.
Oh my god. And
It's,
also just the fact that it's just kind of darkly comedic that everything in this body gets worse over time. It's
yes.
like, we got like stress and hair loss and like and like erectile dysfunction. Oh, by the way, kidney stones, bam. Blood clots, bam.
Oh my god.
Clogging a pulmonary artery, bam.
The freaking embolism. Like, I was literally at my old studio, we did a lot of like medical legal work, where we produce exhibits for lawyers who were presenting medical malpractice cases, right? And they were suing like a hospital or a doctor or whatever. One of the cases that we worked was about a pulmonary embolism, where a blood clot in a man's leg, due to the surgery being performed incorrectly, traveled up to his heart towards his heart and got stuck in his pulmonary artery, and he died.
Oh.
And so when I saw in the show that they were talking about like an embolism and it was traveling and it was getting clotted, and I was like, yo, this person has like minutes before they're dead. Like, it was crazy. I was like, oh my god, this is so compelling.
It's like such a like do or die situation.
Yeah.
And then like the characters take it upon themselves to like act in heroic ways to save the body. Yeah. Because they're just little cells. You're like, oh my, I care a lot about this. Yeah. Like, and you're like, these stakes actually feel impactful, and the actions of the characters actually feel impactful, and the choices that they make feel compelling. And how did I get to this point in my life?
I know. I walked away from this anime like, that was great.
Like, that was really good.
Yeah.
I will say I to give the anime credit, I do think it becomes very compelling, probably around the gonorrhea episode when which is a very funny statement out of context, right? Where it's like, oh no, I promise the anime gets very good around the gonorrhea episode, right? But legitimately, that's kind of, I feel like, the first time when the stakes really do feel very dire, and you see the sacrifice that the cells are making, and you begin to root for them and you begin to care for them, and like no joke, watching this show makes me feel like, oh god, I gotta get up and do some exercise and take a shower. Holy fuck.
There's so much like guilt tripping in this.
I was like, oh no.
Like, you better take care of your body or else your cells are gonna suffer.
Right. But like this poor dude, he gets erectile dysfunction and then gonorrhea, his hair falls out, and then he has to work overtime for 2 days straight and gets a blood clot because of it. What the fuck?
Yeah, there is, I think it illustrates really well the cascading effect of how you think you have one problem, but it spirals into another and then into another when it comes to your health. And so you just have to take care of yourself as best you can.
And it's also like a cautionary tale about abusive work environments.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
The ways in which your company should not do that to you. Obviously, like it feels like a kind of a chiding response to Japanese work culture.
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole lot. It goes rather heavy-handed at times, I would say, like kind of like holier than thou on my pedestal kind of feel sometimes. You should have taken care of your body, or like, why is he doing this to his body? But at the same time, if you really look at it, you can kind of understand why this dude is coping the way that he is with booze and with caffeine, because he's in a
100%.
terrible because he in himself is probably in a code black environment himself. So
it's actually very interesting because I think that in a funny way, all of these things happening week after week to this man's body are very funny in a dark way, but also like it's actually very interesting because it actually does tell a narrative. It serves a narrative purpose. Because here's the thing about cells at work, where we joked about how like everything happens to this person's body, like, everything's going wrong, right? But the body is healthy enough to deal with it. But weirdly, in Cells at Work Code Black, because those things reverberate out and like affect the body and like cascade into other consequences, it feels more permanent, and it feels like there's actually a narrative being created about this person that we never see, which I think is actually really cool.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Like,
you get curious about what's happening in his life.
Right, like you can tell that this is probably like just like a middle-aged salary man. He's being overworked. He works at a really shitty company. He hasn't taken care of his body for probably a multitude of reasons, but like there's kind of no helping it now, and like his body is just doing the best it can to like keep him up, and like I'm so compelled.
Yeah,
I'm invested.
It is.
I need to finish this anime.
Great. I highly recommend that you finish it. The ending is so like, I really thought it was extremely appropriate.
Okay. I will say I have read the title cards for the episodes, and I think I have an idea of what happens.
Okay.
In the last episode. I'm pretty sure it's something like heart attack, like revival, the end, or something incredibly telling like that. But I do remember while watching this show, I was like, is the end of this series that he's just gonna die? He's going to die, and the cells are going to experience cell death. That's what I was expecting. It looks like that's not necessarily the case, which I guess I'm glad about, because I'm suddenly invested. So
good.
So those shows. I didn't finish Stone Wars. Dr.
I did.
Stone
Oh
Wars,
my God.
but you did.
Yeah,
and
it was fun.
I have read the manga though, and I'm pretty sure this is a fairly faithful adaptation. It's no Promise Neverland, to tell you that.
Yeah, I have. How much of the manga have you read? Like,
I'm caught up.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I've actually really enjoyed the last couple chapters. Or the last arc in general. I think it's a much needed it's a much needed counterbalance to the rest of the show. Or the series rather. I won't go into it much more than that.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm really hoping that they'll continue adapting it because it's been a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they will. Yeah. It's a very popular series.
Yeah.
How did you enjoy it? Anything to say? Any notes?
No, I mean, I think it was fun. Yeah, they just keep going through the story in a way that's really entertaining. And I don't really have any complaints about it actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you like the first season, you'll like the second one. It's
nice.
Kind of like the Yuru camp, you know.
Good. Love to see it. To see it.
Yeah.
Let's see. What's next? Okay, one that we actually did finish, or I finished. I don't know if you did. But I finished Heaven's Design Team.
I did not finish that. I'm like a couple episodes away from finishing it.
Heaven's Design Team feels very much like Cells at Work, where it's very like funny edutainment, right? You learn some things about animals, and it's presented to you with these like colorful fun, distinct characters, and that's very enjoyable. It's very enjoyable all the way through. I did learn some really fucked up shit about mole rats. I learned some really fucked up shit about naked mole rats.
Oh, the animal kingdom has a lot going on.
The animal kingdom is truly frightening. Like when okay, so I don't remember if like I'm pretty sure we watched this episode together, but or I may have watched it alone. Anyway, oh no, we did watch it together. Yeah.
The naked mole rats? Yeah.
Yeah. Where I was like, oh, this is probably like ants, right? Because they're like, oh, we like
right,
dig tunnels. We live underground. We dig tunnels through potatoes and tubers.
Yeah.
We have a queen, and she, kind of mind controls us. We don't have any like. We're all workers. We all have the workers aren't like sexually developed, and everything that they're talking about is like, oh yeah, it sounds like ants. And then you learn about mole rats, and you're like, I didn't know mammals could be like that.
It suddenly makes sense because they're all dressed in pink, and it's like I was like the whole time I was like, why are they pink? Why are they pink? There's a reason for this.
Yeah, I was like, wait, so like they use the hormones in their poop to mind control each other, and that's how the queen maintains the presence as the queen of the. Oh my god!
Oh my god!
I learned a lot of things about animals that I like that were very fun, and I enjoyed them very much. I also learned some things I wish I had never learned about animals. Animals are truly horrifying.
I'd say we come away mostly, obviously, more educated. We came away with a lot of neat facts, and some horrific ones. But overwhelmingly nice, neat facts.
We become educated, and we are burdened with the weight of the knowledge we bear for the rest of our lives. Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, the show overall is like super well done. I really liked it.
It's very, very, very cute. I love this show. And it gives me as much joy as Cells at Work does.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of joy.
Yeah. It's so fun. It's a really easy watch. You just tune in,
sure.
And you learn a couple things, and then you're out.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Mm-hmm. I really, really enjoyed this. I also highly recommend reading the manga. It's equally cute.
Nice.
I like learning about animals.
Even
if I learned some truly unforgettably horrific knowledge.
And I like the characters a lot too, the design team themselves, the designers and everything.
They're
really
very
fun.
charming.
Yeah.
I like the way that they're characterized. And it's very cute. I mean, what more is there to say about this show?
Yeah.
Like, it's very. I like the. It's very funny the idea of animals as like requests to a design team.
Oh, it's so hilarious. The concepts that they have to work off of.
This is 100% like something that just could not exist in any other culture but Japan.
I want something fluffy but spiky,
well, it's such a Japanese way of looking at it, like culturally. To just be
yeah, definitely.
What if animals, but outsourced to a design company? Yeah.
Yeah, their work culture is very Japanese too, and
yeah, it's what a delight of a show. It's such a good
fun.
watch.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Sk8 the Infinity.
Oh, I'm so ready.
Okay. Yeah, boy, where does one even start with Sk8?
Where do we begin?
So, Sk8 the Infinity is about skateboarding.
Yeah.
It's about boys skateboarding.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is no joke, probably the best show of the season.
Yeah.
I think that's very well not,
I think I could agree with that. I think it is probably the best produced one.
It's well, okay. So here's the thing: is that the finished product is very good.
Yeah.
But and this is I'll link an article about this. But both this show and One Direct Priority went through production meltdowns.
Right. Like what kind of costs did these teams have to pay in order to produce such a good product,
And both of them had to have a sudden recap episode, essentially.
Yes.
Which woof. There's an entire article that I will link about like that production kind of mishap that happened. But I mean, needless to say, it does reveal one thing about anime, which is that even the good shows have something happening underneath all the stuff. And like, man, it's kind of a shame, right? Because obviously we watch a lot of anime, we talk about a lot of anime, and it is important to recognize just how dire the circumstances are for animators, which are, the backbone, the lifeblood, the flesh of the anime industry. It really is a shame. And I wish we could move into a better space, but like really only KyoAni does that. KyoAni does have another anime coming out though, I guess. They're coming out with the second season of Dragon Maid, which is nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, putting that aside, because I'm not gonna recap the article, but essentially like Sk8 the Infinity had like one person basically like storyboard and like key animate every single episode, which is just nuts.
That is just insanity.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
And then One Direct Priority was a very small team that worked on every single episode, which I mean, it's one of those things where you have a hard time blaming them because just how much how much people want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Being able to work on a show where you have a lot of like creative freedom to do what you want and to be able to tell the story that you want to, and to be strapped to the like production timeline of a Japanese televised anime is honestly a shame, right? And like there are obviously studios that can put out amazing stuff on these like really tight schedules, but like boy, it just churns through people. Like
definitely
it is always something to recognize as people who watch and love anime, to see the people behind the anime who put it in front of your eyeballs, right? And to spare a thought or two about like just how disposable they are considered, really.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a shame, because Sk8 the Infinity fucking slaps. Holy shit. Sk8 the Infinity fucking slaps. Oh my god.
It's so fun to watch. They did such a good job with it. Like,
so Sk8 the Infinity has a very simple premise.
yeah.
It has a very simple story progression.
Yeah.
It is done very, very well.
Really well.
Because like all of the stuff that happens is like so predictable, right? You have like you have like the two main characters, one who has definitely some like trauma surrounding like the death of his father, right? The absence of his father. And his inability to like kind of enjoy snowboarding after that, even though he's been doing it for such a long time. And then you have the main character who wants to build skateboards, but also wants to be a good skater. And he sees all these people in front of him who are so talented, and the gap feels so big.
Yeah.
And he feels like the inadequacy of like the imposter syndrome of being around those people. And it's like, that's like, it's such a like bread and butter, like very simple like conflict, right?
Yeah.
It's been done a million times before, but it hits, right? It's good.
It does.
It
you
works
really feel for the characters.
you care about them and you feel for them, and you feel where they're coming from, like both of them, because here you have one character who is like, I want to skate with Adam, who we're from now on we're just gonna call Skateboard Dio. Because holy shit, it's
my god.
Okay, so his voice actor is Takehito Koyasu, who is the voice actor of Dio, but literally everything he does is extremely Dio.
Yeah.
He literally has this like skateboard attack where he whips his skateboard around and slams it down and forces himself like to go backwards up a hill and like uses it to like slam into people, and they're like, what the fuck?
Labuhagu.
Labuhagu. And then he has another thing where he just stops. He gets off his fucking skateboard and he decks somebody with it. He just goes,
picks
wham!
it up and slaps them in the face with it, and he calls it an attack. But like he gave it like a name. And it's like, no, you just attacked someone with your skateboard. It doesn't need a name.
I saw that happen. I was like, what? What?
Yeah.
What did this show become?
Yeah, that was exactly my feeling when I saw that moment too. I was like, I didn't think we'd go this far.
Yeah, I was like, this isn't a skateboard trick. This is assault.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh my god.
This isn't a race anymore. This isn't about skateboarding. This is about people trying to kill other people.
I like that the entire show is about why people like skateboarding.
Yeah.
Because so Sk8 the Infinity is a sports anime, right?
Yes.
It is about a sport. It's about an unconventional sport, but it is about a sport.
Yes.
And so like it's pretty obvious what you do with a sports anime. Like you talk about like the competition, you talk about why the character's relationship to the sport, why they care about it, their personal like connections to it. And Sk8 does a really good job of I think exploring Reki and his relationship to skateboarding, because he loves it. He introduces oh shit, what's the other character's name?
Langa?
Yes, Langa. He introduces Langa to it, and he becomes better than him very rapidly, and he feels inadequate because he's like, I've been skateboarding for so long, and I like there's a vast gulf between us, and then they have a section where he's like where he sees the interview on TV where it's like, oh, I couldn't compete, but I wanted to support the thing in any way I could. And he's like, yeah, I guess I could do that. And then he realizes he doesn't want to do that. And I think that's a great double back
It
arc.
is such a good, like, because you kind of see it coming, you know, like, okay, well, he likes to make skateboards and Long is really good at skateboarding. I bet he'll just kind of fall into the support role.
Right,
but he doesn't.
Yep.
He doesn't let go of the fact that he loves skateboarding. I mean, you know, like, it's like he still wants to he still thinks that it's fun, and he doesn't want to relegate himself to just a support.
Yeah, and I love that, because I think that a lot of times you have that arc played very straight, and like it's just expected, right? It's like,
yes,
okay,
exactly, it's expected.
I may not be able to compete with the blessed monsters at the higher end of the skateboarding, but I love the sport so much. I'll support it any way I can. And here you have a character who is like, I mean, he's a teenager and he's acting in such a volatile way where he's just like, my friend is better than me at skateboarding, so I just won't talk to him anymore. He deserves better than to be with me. And, I like that his character arc is coming around to the fact that, like, no, actually, like, I want to skateboard next to my friend, right? I want to be good enough to be skateboarding by his side, which is super gay, but I mean, sports anime, right? And I like that Longa's arc is different, where he really takes to skateboarding and he really starts to enjoy it and he becomes very good at it very quickly. But his arc is about realizing that he really likes skateboarding because Reki is with him, which is, again, super gay. I mean, it's a sports anime, so the homosexual subtext is out of this world.
Yes.
But that's great. And then you have the other characters, right? You have Cherry and Joe, who you get their development later on, and their relationship to Skater Dio, right? Where skateboarding is also very important to all of them. And you see that Skater Dio, in very classic villain fashion, has taken like his hang-ups and his twisted sense of like you know what love is, and has applied it in a way that is hurting other people, right?
Yeah.
His conviction is not the thing that's incorrect. It's like, you know, it's the way that there's a base assumption that's like kind of gone awry, right? And I kind of like that there is like just an entire arc about like his sort of twisted upbringing and like the expectations of his father and the burden of like making a friend and then like having that friend essentially abandon you when you need him the most. I like that we get that little like that little progression where his like servant, I guess, his like secretary is like, no, I did this, I have to take responsibility. But like he learns that like it's all very well done because it's actually all written in a way where it's like very grounded and very like it's a very basic progression for all of the characters, but they're kind of intertwined in a way that makes them interesting, and they're done well, right? They're not just, they don't feel like they're throwaway. It feels like I actually should be caring about these things.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. Honestly, like, it seems to be so difficult to get a simple story right. And Sk8 the Infinity absolutely nails it. Like, knocks it out of the park. And the skateboarding looks so good!
It looks great.
It never stops looking good. Production meltdowns aside, it never stops looking good. Like, you could tell that in some of the places they're like, okay, this is not a skateboarding scene, so we shouldn't really put that much into it.
Yes. There's quite a bit of that, like, I would say
especially
more towards the
end.
Half, but you don't really mind it because the story is still, you know, it's still going, and you're like, okay, well, I can understand why they had to do this because they need to save this budget for when they actually skateboard.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Skater Dio's like entire arc, and then like Longa getting pulled into his like twisted sense of the world, and then being pulled out by Reki, and then Langa's like, but no, I won't leave you here too. I'm gonna make you learn that skateboarding is fun. And it's such a silly, childish, like,
it's super anime
trope.
Yeah.
But it's so good.
Yeah, it's so great.
It lands so well, and you're like, yes. Because, like, this is a show about a sport with a very obvious villain, right?
Yes.
He's such a bad guy.
Yeah.
He sends other skateboarders to the hospital.
Yeah.
And, like, he essentially just removes their will to skate. He's just like, yes, so you're approaching me. But, like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, he too is skating for a reason, and you see the reasons why he is, and you can see the logic behind like why Langa's able to pull him out of that like twisted sense of his own like loneliness, and like into a world where like he's with other people and has relationships with other people. Like, the thing about skateboarding is what's central to skateboarding in this show is that skateboarding is not about riding a board with 4 wheels. It's about like doing that with other people.
There's a real sense of like community, which I think is 100%. So like you just see it when you go to like a skate park, or when you see like media coverage of skateboarders, is that they have a real sense of community. And it's not just about like, you know, doing fancy tricks and having fun. It's like enjoying the company of other people who are also doing this thing that they love just like you love it. And they're all in, and I love that the show really captures that. It's not just about, you know, the sport, but it's about the feelings that arise from it, and how that connects everyone together.
Infinity, bro.
They're gonna skate into infinity, bro.
I mean, okay, like, it's just so exhausting talking about this, like, after years of being queer baited, but like,
you can't tell me that last hug wasn't a Yuri on ice, like, aborted, like,
like. It's so exhausting talking about this after being queerbaited for years. But like, when somebody asks you, or when somebody tells you they want to skate with you for infinity, that's a proposal.
When Langa thought he was going to die during that race, and then he thinks about Reki.
Like, it is okay. It is one thing for sports anime to have homosexual subtext, because it's always there. But my God, is this something else? I tell you.
Goes in. Langa sits in Reki's room and looks over Reki's like old childhood pictures with like such a fond, loving look on his. It's like, oh my God, you all didn't need to go this far.
Now, there is no substitute for real queer representation, but holy shit, man, I tell you, it is not a very difficult leap to make here. But hey, whatever. This show is really good.
It's fun. It is such a good watch.
Like super fun. Mm-hmm. It's a super great watch. All the characters are written like really well. Like, very simply, but very well.
Yeah.
I like that we got backstory about Cherry and Joe and their relationship to Skater Dio.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that, I think to me, was one of the moments that really grounded Skater Dio as like a villain, because you can see like the progression from like misunderstood child to rebellious teenager to like twisted adult, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's great. Delicious. So good. I hate sports anime. Because I hate sports, right? But I like sports anime because I like stories about people who care a lot about things.
Yeah.
And the thing to me is it's very difficult for me to overcome the hurdle of enjoying sports anime because it's about sports. Even though it's not really about sports. Haikyuu does a great job. Sk8 the Infinity does a great job. But like, there's a lot of game, right? There's a lot of sport in the middle of that, and I oftentimes have a hard time getting through that, especially if it's a sport I really like. I don't care about baseball. I'm so sorry. I just don't care about baseball.
I think the mark of like a really good sports anime isn't necessarily like how well it shows the sport. Obviously, that's a huge factor of it, but it's about the story, and if the story
100%.
manages to make you care about the sport, then it's done its job. I think as a sports anime.
The problem to me is that sports anime feels like a lot of it is basically just continuing to follow the same templates that have been in place since the 80s.
Right, yeah.
Which is a shame, because I think there are much more interesting stories you can tell with sports. Like
Oh, absolutely.
I love Sk8 the Infinity, right?
Yeah.
I love Haikyuu, and they're very straightforward shows about loving a sport and what it means to love a sport.
Yeah.
Because Haikyuu, I think, trends more on the lines of I love volleyball.
Yeah.
And everyone has their own reasons and their relationships towards volleyball. And like they care about their teammates and they care about winning as a team. But also like I feel like it's very different from Sk8, where Sk8 is so much more about skateboard as a vector for relating to other people, and that's very cool. Yeah. I love Ping Pong, the animation.
Yeah.
Because it is this story about like willpower and determination, and all of the stuff that's like juicy about sports anime, but distilled down, and like ping pong is a very simple sport, so it's pretty easy to get across, and also pretty easy to like not spend too much time on, if you know what I mean. Like,
sure,
some sports are very complicated. Some sports have a lot of rules. Even volleyball felt like it had a lot of rules to me. But yeah, I mean, it's, to me, a standout sports show is obviously about the characters and the narrative. But weirdly, it feels like a lot of sports shows don't distinguish themselves in any way. Like, they run through the same tropes, and they kind of just do it without really thinking about it. Which is a shame, because I do like the sports anime that I have watched. Or that I have enjoyed. It's a weird like circular phrasing, but like, I don't hate sports anime. I just don't like sports. I don't really care about sports, but I like sports as a vector for like competition and
of course,
the range of emotions of the human experience.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Oh, it has been already quite the long episode, but let us talk about Wonder Egg priority.
Yeah.
This is the doozy, really. This is really the doozy. So Wonder Egg priority is and big spoilers, big spoilers. Wonder Egg priority also went through a production meltdown. They had to do a recap episode. And it kind of feels like they had to do a recap episode.
Yeah.
Because the last episode is definitely not a last episode.
Yeah. I felt the same way.
It isn't bad as a last episode. I think that they do a lot of things right in that episode specifically. But I also think that it just doesn't feel like a last episode. 100%, it does not feel like a last episode.
No.
It's so hard to talk about the series without having its conclusion, which is a shame, because the special OVA episode, which is to say the last episode of the series, will come out in like the end of June, I think, is when they announced it.
Oh my god, really?
So, we can't really talk about the end of the series and the conclusions that it comes to and what it has to say for itself until then. But we can talk about the rest of the stuff, which we will do. So I mentioned on the sampler episode that this show to me feels like Madoka but with a point, and I didn't realize it then, but actually they are magical girls. Like,
God, definitely.
I did not realize it at the time when we recorded that episode, but weeks later I was like, oh, they are actually magical girls.
Yes, it doesn't seem quite that way in the beginning because everything is so like weird, you know. Everything is meant to be kind of like startling and disjointed, and you don't really know what's going on. But then as they start finding their way through the world and they're finding ways to fight back, it 100% becomes a magical girl show. Yeah.
So I do want to start with the stuff that I liked, because there is a lot about the show that I loved. I would say probably up until episode up until episode 10, probably. I would have ranked this as the number one anime of the season. No contest. Sk8, I think, manages to edge it out a little bit, just because, oh boy, I'm not gonna talk about the downsides yet, but
okay.
Here's what I liked about the show. I like what the show is about.
Yes.
Because it is about girls, like young women, and the abuse that society pushes upon them, right? It is about girls who commit suicide. And okay, before we continue, there is another content warning I have to make. And I didn't realize it at the time, but 100%, if you're going to watch this show, big content warning for like self-harm and like suicidal ideation, because like there is an episode really about that, and I was like, whoa, okay. Okay. Jesus.
In the first, from the first episode, you see that one of the classmates has ended her own life. So that it kind of gives you an idea from the beginning, like, hey, we're not playing around, like, this is what the show is about. But then it really gets into it later on in the show.
It's very it's very a lot, honestly. And I would say that like it's it's almost like a little too much, I think, for me. There's another thing that is a little bit too much, but like big content warning for that. And for very upsetting like things happening to a trans character. Obviously the show is very dark and all of these girls have committed suicide. That's the premise. But I think they take it maybe a little bit too far with one of the characters, who just also happens to be the trans character, which is like, But anyway, basically, big content warning for the stuff that happens to this trans character, because one of the characters is a trans boy who gets sexually assaulted and becomes pregnant. Yeah. Which is like, I know that the show is heavy. I know that it's heavy, but that's going too far. I think
yeah, I don't. I think they're trying to toe that line. Like, we want to show that this point in the story is probably the darkest point in the entire story, right? Like, you can tell that the tonal shift is happening, like, from the beginning of that episode, right? It starts descending very quickly. Like, the end of that episode is meant to be extremely horrifying. And so then the wonder egg that the character opens up belongs to the trans character, and then you learn that their story is probably one of the most messed up in the entire story and the entire series. And
yeah,
it's so wildly uncomfortable, and you don't I don't know, like, I haven't made like a verdict as to whether it was too much for me or not.
Like, okay, so here's where
Yeah.
I kind of stand on this, right?
Sure.
I feel like that on one hand, right, it's very much a thing where it is important to talk about the things that happen to trans people. Like, trans people get murdered at a way higher rate than the normal population. And
Yes.
they experience, like, sexual assault at, like, unprecedentedly high rates, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are very real things to talk about. But I also feel like it's, like, a little bit too much about the suffering of the trans character, even though we know that, like, he's committed suicide and that's why he's in the Wonder Egg, right? Like, obviously there's, like, the thing about, like, you know, the trans boy showing up in what is essentially like a girl's realm. But
Yeah.
but I mean, that weirdly that does get explained by something that I don't like, which is the whole reason the Wonder Egg system exists in the first place. It's just like, oh, that's right, yeah, I guess like two cis guys wouldn't really know. It's also very funny to me that character is like so explicitly trans because he's wearing a trans flag colored jacket.
Look, there's
So
there is
funny.
such a thing as symbolism, and then there's that. There's literally wearing the flag.
No. I will say I don't hate that just because some people really are that dense.
Oh my god.
But
like,
yes, it's
but
very,
I kind of hate it though.
but it's very much like, did you really have to?
Yeah, right. Did they have to? And the answer is no.
The answer is no. But I will say in defense of that, it is very hard in Japanese anime to convey that somebody is trans without being like just overtly offensive. Or
I guess
to have your character misconstrued. And I think that
Sure.
this being this explicit and on the nose, like bonk your head with a hammer obvious, is maybe what it takes. And that's disappointing, but also like, I mean, hey, there's a trans flag in an anime now. That's
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
kind of cool. I mean, God, everything surrounding that episode
Yeah.
is super uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
okay. Here's what I
Yeah.
liked about. Okay, let's start.
Yeah.
Let's start from there. But here's what I liked
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
episode. I like that episode is specifically about Momoe, who is the character
Yeah.
who is
Mhm.
a girl who is often perceived to be a boy.
Yes.
And she doesn't like that, right? Like, she is very much this like Haruka from Sailor Moon archetype, where she's like a very like androgynous, like boyish girl, but she doesn't like that. She wants to be a girl. And I think as far as like in the genre of magical girl stuff goes, I think that that's a valid direction to take that in, right? There are a lot of magical girls who are like, I use magical girl-ing as like an expression of my androgyny. I don't want to be like labeled as just a woman, right? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's completely valid to recognize, especially in an ensemble cast, that a character may appear one way but still want to be perceived one way, or like perceived in another way, right? Like it's kind of it is a theme that mirrors the trans experience, where people will perceive you one way when in reality, you know, you are another way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I like that, and I like that the trans character shows up in, I don't remember his name. I'm so sorry. I've watched a lot of anime in the last like week. But that's a very cute episode in many ways because it's thematically very important, right? Saying like, this is a character who looks like a boy but is a girl, but she's not trans. She just looks like a boy, right? And then juxtaposed with a character who is explicitly, like, over the top explicitly trans.
Yeah.
And I do like that like the show 110% does not misgender him, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is a boy, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're going to explain to you the very like basic idea of what a trans person is, right? Whether it is regarded well by the trans community or not, right? It's like, I am a boy who's trapped in a woman's body. There are some problematic things about that idea as a whole, but to explain to somebody who has never heard of a trans person, that is the explanation people usually give. And the show never at any point invalidates that gender identity, which I think is really nice, and not something you necessarily see too much of in anime. And that's nice. I like that at the end he's like, in another life, we could be in a relationship, and that would, I like that he's the one that is able to recognize Momoe for what she is.
It was so cute.
I think that's really
cute. It was adorable.
And I think to have that framed as like and to have that come from the perspective of Momoe specifically, who essentially is fighting for her friend who was a lesbian, right? But she's not a lesbian, and to have her like acknowledge that this person is a boy, right? That's weirdly, it is very progressive. It checks all the boxes.
Hugely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And in the same vein, like, Momoe was approached on her first date by a guy who thought that she was a guy.
Right,
so
exactly, yeah.
She's basically experienced, like, well, she's been, I guess, traumatized, like, twice. Like, once by a female classmate who wanted to be with her because she was a girl, but Momoe only wants to be with a guy. And then, secondly, traumatized by a guy who thought that she was a guy. And so... But the way that the show portrays it is like, even though these negative things happened to Momoe, it doesn't necessarily portray these two gay characters as bad people. Like, they both, well, I mean, at least the guy was super apologetic about the mistake. And then the girl is someone that Momoe wanted to save.
That's right. His name was Kaoru. That was the character's name.
Yeah, Kaoru, yeah. And then they have the trans character who validates Momoe as a woman. And so it was like a really super, super progressive episode.
All of those aspects of that episode absolutely work for me.
Yeah,
for me personally.
I really wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is a show specifically about like trauma. And yeah. So it goes a little bit too far, even though it's like, because like, we know that they've committed suicide, and that's like a thing, and that's the premise, but like, oh, holy shit, that's so rough.
I think,
that's too much for me, honestly.
Yeah, if I were to as like if I was on the production team, right, like trying to think of like, if I had this feedback, like, yo, y'all kind of went too hard, like, how else would you have approached this this episode and still maintain the same tone and stuff? Like, would you be able to show that content in a different way, or remove that content and still have it portray the same like atmosphere or get the same point across? And I think if they had left out at least, I guess, like the imagery of what happened to Kaoru, or
oh god, that was so upsetting too. The fact that they like show enough to imply like what is happening, and not just like telling you about it. It feels like,
right.
It almost feels a little bit like I would say that, like, for the most part, a lot of the show does pretty well at not giving you like trauma porn.
Right.
But there are the couple of scenes really where they like kind of do get into it, and it's like, that was definitely one of them to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure like whether it's like you were kind of like alluding to earlier, is like, I don't know how much of it is they wanted you to see that and be uncomfortable with it because this is a thing that happens to trans folk, or how much of it was like sensationalism, you know. And it doesn't strike me as like as the time of it doesn't strike me as the kind of show that would do that for sensationalist purposes, but you always have to question that kind of thing when it comes to visual media.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think that the intentions were good, but also, I mean, when your existence as a trans person is kind of defined by trauma, that's just upsetting, right?
Yeah.
Obviously the entire show is about that, so, you know, but the show also doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Like, trans people don't exist in a vacuum. There's a lot of kind of very complicated factors surrounding it. I would say, to me personally, like, that episode was a little bit gratuitous.
Yeah.
But what I do like about the rest of the show is that the show is about young women facing and helping other young women overcome their trauma.
Yeah.
Regardless of if it's after their suicide, right? Because it can kind of feel like at that point it's like, you know, like, does it matter, right? And the answer that they come to is yes, of course it matters. It always matters, right?
Yes.
And I like that the villains of the show are society in a sense, right? It's not pulling any punches about what kind of like abuse that is either, right? It's kind of, this is what I actually really liked about the very early antagonists of Persona 5. A little bit less so once it gets like to the last couple, because at that point it starts to get a little abstract. But
yeah.
the first couple of like antagonists are very scummy people, but they're adults who are abusing their power over young people. And like, this feels very much the same way, where it is all about the different kinds of trauma that people carry, caused oftentimes by the adults in their lives. And I think that's awesome. That's great. Having a magical girl show where the villain is society. Good. So good. What? Like, I can't overstate how much like the enemy is both society and trauma, and what you're doing as a magical girl is like is approaching and facing that trauma. And like, oh god, I've talked a lot about One Direct Priority in the sampler episode. I've covered a lot of the kind of basic stuff about, like, you know, Ai has a hard time facing a lot of these traumas unless she is able to get support from the person, the egg, essentially, right?
Yeah.
There is and then you have like kind of the way that the other characters approach it. And I like that there's such a breadth of characters. Like, not just the main cast, even though the main cast is excellent. But the fact that all of the eggs kind of have very like different approaches. Like, there's Nehru's like friend who essentially died while performing experiments on herself, and she's completely unafraid of death, really. She doesn't really care about it, but her trauma is still related to a like a man, right? Like an older man in the in the same sphere that she works at, right? And like having him, and he's at that point, he is kind of a stand-in for like society, because Nehru is trying to protect Kotobuki from being like taken as a sample, like a science sample, basically. Right. And so, you know, she doesn't really want to be like dissected in that way. And I think that's really interesting and really great.
Yeah, I really enjoy the bonds that the girls form throughout the show with the Wonder Egg candidates and each other. They all feel like really like wholesome.
Yeah,
and very comforting. Yeah,
they feel more like realistic young women than like pretty much any other anime, really. Like, realistically, with some exceptions, but like the fact that they don't all get along all the time, they argue, right. They hang out together, and when they hang out, all they do is they just go to a McDonald's and they order like a shit ton of fries and just like pool them in the middle. It's such a like teenager thing to do.
Yeah.
And all that's really delightful to me.
Yeah.
I really liked the animation of it, even though you can tell they had a lot of trouble in the last couple episodes.
It got rough. They did save it for the important parts, I'll say. That.
They saved it for the important parts, but there's definitely one scene where it's like rotoscoped and like even just very barely rendered in the last episode. Quote unquote last episode. There is a scene or a lot of scenes where the animation just isn't as like smooth and detailed as it is in the first couple episodes, and obviously this has to do with what we talked about earlier, the production meltdown, essentially, which is a shame because it's like such a passion project by a bunch of a small team of creative people, and they care a lot about making this show, and they cared a lot about the characters, and it really comes through with how much care is put into each of them. I really like what each of them kind of goes through, where you have, I as the main character who is this idea of like an innocent child, right? Where the world is harsh and tough and terrible, but throughout it all, she tries to maintain, her sense of self. You have like Nehru, who's like very much like this like kind of logical straightforward person who still has her own attachments, and like I like that her sort of arc is about learning to become close to her peers, essentially. I like that Momoe's arc has a lot to do with her gender and the way that people perceive her, and I like how Rika was handled as a character, because she is very abrasive, and in a way that's not just like, oh, that's cute. Like in a way that's like genuinely upsetting and like genuinely off-putting. You're like, I would not want to be friends with this person. But you can tell it's because of all of the stuff that they show about her character, where she used to be an idol, and she never knew her father, and she thinks her mother's kind of a deadbeat, and she has a history of self-harm. And it's almost like she's the only one of them that's like explicitly like suicidal, right? And her coming to terms with dealing with that is I'll say that episode is a little bit rocky. I think how you experience that episode will very much be dependent on you, right? Because to me it was very uncomfortable. But in a way where I could recognize that it was because, this is like a very real experience. And that's kind of what it's meant for, right? And I like that her kind of motivation for that is it ultimately is like, it's very simple, right? It's just kind of like, I have friends that care about me. I have a pet that's basically my child that I care about, right? I don't want to become like what I think my mother is like, right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I would say like the presentation of her story reminds me of Asuka from Evangelion.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, she's really abrasive, and then you just kind of as she starts to bond with, you know, the people in her life, you get to learn a bit more about why she turned out that way and why she's such a proud person, and she tries to put up this like really confident image, and and then it starts falling apart at the end when she really gets tested. Well,
that's I love the fact that these characters are so complicated and like detailed and like you know, realistic. Not that realistic is like a measure of whether something is good or not, but like when you're approaching something like really heavy drama, having well written realistic characters can be very important. And I like that they act like teenagers, like volatile teenagers, and they like just they aren't appealing all the time, right? Like it's not, you don't even necessarily root for them all the time. You're just like, oh god, please. Right? It's kind of like, it is extremely like watching Evangelion, where you're like, oh my god, Shinji, please! Asuka, why are you such a shitter? And then you learn why she's a shitter, and you're like, okay, I guess I feel bad now. I really like, okay.
Yeah.
Production meltdown and like the fact that it's not actually the last episode aside, I really like the last episode of One Direct Priority, even though I really hate episode, I think 10. So I love the fact that okay, I'm not in love with the fact that there's like parallel worlds or whatever is happening, but I mean it's whatever. Like I can suspend my disbelief that far.
It's just a means of her like reconciling with herself.
Right. I love that the last episode is about and I love that it's about her reconciling her own trauma and like seeing a self that didn't meet Koito or become like entangled with the Wonder Eggs, who was essentially the source of her trauma is the teacher. And like, I mean, we spend the entire show being like, this teacher's sus as fuck. He's so sus. And it really comes to a head in this episode, and you're not sure, actually, if that's really what he's like, and I think that's very intentional.
Yeah, definitely.
And I actually really like that. I like that you can tell that there's something like a little like off about the teacher. It's very uncomfortable whenever he's on screen.
Yeah.
And like it's you're like, what is happening here, right? Because like obviously he was tangled with Koito, and she committed suicide, and so immediately off the bat, like the way that it is framed, you cannot trust this man. But he is becoming close to Ai's mom, right? And I realizes that, you know, she also has feelings for this very handsome teacher, which is, I mean, it's whatever, right? It's like, it's young people will imprint on whatever, right? Whatever reasonable adult is around them, that's fine. But it's like very uncomfortable because you don't know if he like ever reciprocated like Koito's feelings. You know that he painted a painting of her, and that feels very like intimate and kind of gross.
He also painted one of Ai as well,
right? Which was also very uncomfortable and kind of gross.
Yeah, it's kind of like
I do toes like the line.
I like the fact that you don't quite have all the answers to his character because you're looking at it from the lens of Ai, and she doesn't quite have a grasp on who he is as a person. I would say after this last episode, you kind of walk away with it, kind of trying to believe in Ai, right? In her version of him, where she's come around to the fact that he loves her mom and she wants to support her mom and wants her mom to be happy, so she's willing to support their relationship, regardless of her doubts. I
100% agree. That is exactly how I feel. How I felt about that episode, where I was like, I guess like she came to a decision about like what would make her mom happy, and honestly, like I can't say like no, you know? That was really good. So there is one more thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to what I liked. I like that the kind of I guess the not the crux of the show, but like the climactic arc of the show has essentially girls who have been in close proximity to death for the entirety of the series, and having them come face to face with the fear of death, right? Like there's the temptation of death that like draws people to their suicide. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but like the fear of death that all of the girls experience when they reach the end of their egg work, right?
Yeah.
When they reach the end of their work as magical girls, like a being representing death comes, a harbinger of death comes and like strikes the fear of death into them, and they can't even sleep. And oh my god, the episode where that happens, I just remembered like the latter part of that episode was so unsettling.
Yeah. Hugely.
It was so unsettling that I was legitimately unnerved, and I don't know if an anime has ever instilled like real dread in me, but that I legitimately felt dread there.
Yeah, they do a great job of making you feel highly uncomfortable when they want to.
Yeah, that entire episode is uncomfortable for many reasons, but man, the like crown on that episode, holy shit, is when the crocodile like dies, and then Panic, its name is Panic, and then like, oh god, that entire, it's just, that was so upsetting to watch.
Yeah, that was definitely, I would say, one of the most upsetting parts of the entire show, where everything kind of shifts toward that, like, you know, that it's going to be like the worst part. Narratively speaking. Yeah. And
like, it's not like it necessarily comes out of nowhere either, right? Like the entire show has kind of been primed to have a certain tone to it, that only gets more as each episode progresses. It has no misgivings, and it does not like fake you out. Like it doesn't fake you out like Monica does. I mean, Monica doesn't really fake you out, I guess, because
Monica like definitely has the shock value in the beginning, but it steadily, I'd say, declines towards, you know, a certain path, and it every now and then gives you like little teasers of hope, because the girls are trying their best to stay optimistic and all that, but it just only further feeds into the despair at the end.
Yeah, 100%. I like Wonder Egg Priority feels like it, because the thing that everybody talks about in relation to Madoka is the episode 3 like surprise, right?
Yeah.
Where the tone suddenly seems to shift, but the tone of Wonder Egg Priority is pretty consistent. It just continues to get darker until you hit the like break point.
Right. I would say like it like, even though it gets darker, the wrap up at the end is probably the most hopeful that the show has ever been, right? Because it kind of starts at a bit of a low point, you know, when you're trying to get used to things, but you're in the point of view of Ai, who's been bullied and she feels ostracized and all of that, and then it slowly builds up, and then it goes downward like towards the climax, and then it pops back up because you realize that these girls have grown from their ventures, and especially Ai has had the most progression, and she shows how strong she's become. I would say
I liked the last episode a lot, especially because of that, and because of what happens with at the end of the dream, essentially. And so all of that stuff, like I really like about the show. I like the direction it goes. I like that I like that the main antagonist of the show is a representation of death, right? Because it feels very in line with what the rest of the show is about. Right? About these young women confronting trauma, and all along the way, death has been a part of it, and finally turning around and having to face death itself, it feels like the natural evolution of that. It feels like a natural progression. Now, there's, you know, a lot of other minor stuff I could say that I really liked. But one of the major things I definitely want to talk about is the animation is gorgeous. You know, even though it kind of drops off in quality in the last couple episodes, they save the animation for where it counts. But I gotta say, like, throughout the series, like, it's so good at showing like very, very like minute things that nobody would ever animate unless they specifically chose to like closely study what something was like. Like, obviously, we talked about this, but in the opening when she like takes the little the yogurt off the lid, right? There's there's the scene where they eat the sukiyaki, and you see like the beef fall into the little like egg dip, and you're like, wow, right? A lot of the animation in this show is stunning. It really is spectacular. And I don't think that the ending of it not being as consistent as the rest of it really like actually mars it in any meaningful way.
You could tell they did the best that they could, and even then, like, even though the production quality kind of dropped, it looks like the quality of it, I would say, is comparable to like your average anime, you know, at the end. It's not even like bad, it's just average.
It's not even bad. For sure, it's not bad.
And what I really like too is like, even though it mostly is like a show where it's the girls talking to each other or learning things about the world, the action sequences are actually quite well done too. And I wasn't really expecting that from this kind of show, I guess. Especially the parts where they're using their magical weapons feels kind of like a hybrid between Sailor Moon and Trigger. You know, something about the aesthetic is very much like that.
I think I can pinpoint it, actually. Yeah. It's because the transformation noise of the weapons sounds very Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
And when they defeat the trauma, like they gave them a name. I don't remember what the name was. But like the traumatic kind of incarnation, it bubbles up and explodes into a very Trigger-esque like shower of blood. I saw that episode when I was like, this looks like a Trigger thing.
Yeah.
But even the process of them exploding looks very Trigger. But like, you're
it
absolutely
looks good.
Right.
Yeah,
it feels very Sailor Moon and very Studio Trigger. And it looks just stellar.
It's great. Yeah,
I will say what I like is there is a lot of attention paid to the facial expressions of the characters. And, like, this might be something that comes from the director being like a live action director, but man, this anime is so good at showing people talking to each other in a way that's dynamic, because they talk to each other, but there's like natural pauses, ebbs and flows to the conversation, and they emote at each other, right?
Yeah, the subtleties are really, really key.
The visual storytelling is very good in something that people often kind of overlook when it comes to anime, because they're like, oh, all you gotta do is like make a 2-frame animation of the mouth opening and closing,
the mouth flaps.
Right? But there's so much that can be conveyed about characters and their relationships with each other, based on how they physically present to each other. Communication is like 80% like, you know, physical, right? It's not verbal. But like, for instance, when they're like talking to each other and like they just make expressions at each okay, actually, very specifically, the first episode of the show, you can see this little like scene where I is not gonna follow the egg, right? So she like pulls, like she tugs on her and feels her like stop, and then she just gives her a look, and then she kind of looks back and says like sorry or something. Like, there's almost no dialogue there, but like
you understand
that
exactly
exchange
what's happening.
is so good. It's such good storytelling.
Yes.
And it's like done in an explicitly visual way, and like
Yeah.
more anime has to do this.
I would say like one of my favorite moments as an example of this was actually in the last episode where you see the interaction between Ai and her mom, where
yes.
She doesn't want to go to school, and then she comes back, and then her mom, like you can see her thought process on her face, where she's like, she kind of realizes, and then she thinks about what she has to do to comfort Ai, and then she goes into mom mode where she comforts her. And that all plays out in just like a few seconds on her face, but they animate it so well, and then you just see the interaction between them.
I think Wonder Egg Priority might be the best show about people talking to each other, because there's no other show that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, just nothing comes to mind that is as good at like conveying how characters like should be speaking to each other, right? Because here's the thing. Wonder Egg Priority is willing to leave silence, like silent moments, and let the animation do the talking. Yeah. And that is shockingly rare. It is shockingly rare. Yeah. But like it really, really works. Because the characters aren't framed in a way where, like, literally framed, right? In a way where you have like one shot where like we're staring at a character's face, it's like a close-up, and then they flap their mouth, and then we cut to another shot, like another close-up of a character's face, and they flap their mouth, right? But this is a show that's willing to take a wide angle and have two characters move and talk to each other, and move while they're talking to each other, and like sometimes not talk to each other and still move, right? The little like motions that they make, the like tugs and like stops and the looks that they give each other, it's all so good. Yeah. It's all so weirdly rare in anime. I don't know why.
Cause it's difficult.
It's expensive. I mean, it is expensive. Like,
it is expensive.
And actually, I can tell you exactly why. Probably, it's probably because it's such a small team that worked on it, right? Yeah. Like when you are so intimately aware of the way that each of these characters is supposed to be on a personal level, it's a lot easier to create for him. And like, it's the kind of thing that it's like one of the first things to get cut, because you can just kind of gloss over it with more dialogue, right? Yeah. But when an anime effectively uses its visuals to tell the story, like especially one where it's not just action all the time, like there are action scenes in this, but like a lot of it is people talking to each other. Yep. It's like, wow, this is really good. I didn't realize how much depth I was missing from my anime.
I seen what I've been missing.
Yeah, and it's such a shame too, because it's like so many shows are about people talking to each other. Yeah, like it's one thing to make it like dynamic and interesting to look at, like Kaguya, right? Kaguya-sama makes everything very fun to watch because it is very playful with its like, you know, camera and stuff. Yeah. But Wonder Egg Priority shows you that you can really do a lot with a little. And I don't mean a little in like the animation itself is sparse, but it's like so effective at using the visuals to tell like the story. And why does more anime not do this? I mean, I could probably tell you why. It's probably the production pipeline, honestly. Like, we know that the production pipeline fucks with stuff. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so there's a fuck ton of stuff I love about this show. I could go on for hours, and like we're really at risk of doing that. But I will mention the stuff I did not like. Okay. We touched on the trans stuff, the trans character Kaoru. I feel like that was handled a little bit gratuitously, and a little bit like, because I don't think any other character goes through an experience as like explicitly traumatic as that. it's, you know, other than like the death of the pets that we see on screen, right? But like,
Right.
I feel like pet's not the right word. Like magical girl animal companions, right?
Yeah.
But like that sequence happens, but like of the eggs, right? Like that's the most upsetting thing that happens, and the most like kind of like you just feel really icky afterwards.
Yeah.
But we mentioned that. There's one other thing, like one kind
Okay.
of like elephant in the room that we've been like kind of walking around the whole time. But like, why is the show about AI? Like, this show did not have to make a sci-fi pivot.
I
and
was
for
wondering
some
when we
reason
would
it
address
did.
this. Yeah, the whole Frill episode.
Yeah.
I guess they needed to explain how these girls are able to jump through dreams and visit suicide, like people who have committed suicide and all this. Like, they needed some kind of explanation for it. I am very curious as to how they'll wrap that storyline up, because obviously they haven't. They just kind of left it there, and
Yeah, right.
The last hint of it that we get is something rather sinister, which is that the Akkas, or at least one of them, is willing to sacrifice these girls for his own goals, right? He just wants to see his daughter again. And that's where we left off with it. So I'm hoping that the extra episode that we'll release in June will address that. I'm sure it will, but yeah, I don't know why they felt like they needed to do that, other than like explaining stuff. But I'm gonna assume that it will be related to the central theme, you know, and everything.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I despise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few things that I like won't excuse in terms of like narrative. As far as like, you know, plot hole and kind of stuff like that goes. There are very few things that I won't excuse. For the, you know, obviously for the sake of a better story, and this doesn't make for a better story. I hate. I hate when shows make sci-fi pivots because they have to explain something. Like,
it is 100%. It feels like that. Yeah.
It feels like, I agree with you that it feels like they had to explain why everything was happening.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't care about why anything
It felt like
happening.
they didn't necessarily need to, or they could have like explained it a lot less like involved. You know, I'm not even sure how to really. They could have left it a little more abstract, and I feel like I would have been fine with that. Yeah, I would have had questions, but it's not important narratively speaking. It's not as the girls, you know, and their journeys. And I don't even like. I was kind of like put off by the fact that maybe Frill has something to do with these girls committing suicide. Like maybe she's like influencing them.
Mm-hmm.
I was like. But then what's the point in
Yes.
hammering home all of the trauma that they go through? Because these are
Right.
legitimately things that people would suffer from that would cause them to maybe have suicidal ideations or thoughts, you know?
It to me muddles the themes.
Yeah,
To me,
yeah.
yeah. To me, it muddles the themes of the show, and that's the greatest sin that it can do, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't do so intentionally is the problem. Like,
right.
It because it's just trying to explain logically why things are happening, and I hate this because I'm watching an anime. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for just about anything.
They didn't need to explain it.
Yeah, they didn't need to explain it. If the characters started shooting laser beams out of their hands for no reason, I'd be like, okay, fair enough.
It's already out. They've made the show from episode 1 be completely outrageous to the point that you just have to suspend your disbelief in order to progress with the story and like follow it, right? And so since you're already in that mindset, you don't need to go back to logic and be like, okay, but this is why it's happening though.
Right. It feels damaging to the narrative and to the themes of the show to have to explain, well, okay, so you see, we were once two human beings, and we two human beings were geniuses. So we were basically under government watch 24/7, and so we decided to make a person. We decided to make an AI child that we would raise as father and father. It's definitely not gay, bro.
Are they brothers? I don't remember.
I don't think they're brothers.
Okay.
They're just like I think they're just friends basically. Or just two guys who were put into the same situation. I'm pretty sure. Like all this does is just raise more questions. I'm like, just why? Why would you do any of that? Why would you do any of that? Right? And it's like, it's upsetting that they decided to, because I don't mind the fact that they gave Akka and Uraka back stories, right?
Right.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't like what they did with it because I don't feel the need to have like the premise explained to me because I've already suspended my disbelief enough that it doesn't matter. I'm watching an anime about girls fighting like the incarnation of trauma, right? And the fact that they frame it so that Frill is responsible for like the temptation of death, right? It's just kind of upsetting to me because it's like, well, like you're right. Like it's just like, why does any of the rest of this matter then? Why does the trauma matter, right? And it's like that should be the most important thing to me, and you undermine it a little bit by trying to explain it. Now,
right. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I don't want to speak too much on it without having seen the last episode because they might actually like turn it around. I kind of like this juxtaposition between like death, the temptation of death, and the fear of death, as well as Eros, the god of like, you know, love and sexy time, right?
Yeah.
I like this framing of love and desire as the opposite of death, because it feels it's a very like classical literature kind of feel to me, right? Where I'm like, oh yes, of course, yes, right? You do sex so that you can make babies, and making babies staves off death, right? It's literally the creation of life is the opposite of death. All right, I put it in a funny way and then I put it in a real way, right? But I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah, I like that a lot too.
I like it a lot in the same way that I like that Gurren Lagann juxtaposes the desire to improve and expand and grow with stagnation and those like oppression, essentially, right? Those opposing themes work very well together, and I like that aspect of the explanation. I don't understand why they had to do the technology about it, right? Like if it was just, we used to be two human beings and we're fighting the god of death, that would be fine. That would make like, perfect sense to me.
We created this whole system to fight the god of death, and we created this motivation where you guys would try to save your loved ones who committed suicide, and therefore you're wrapped up in this scheme to fight death. And that's right. That's great. That's fine. Like, fine, magical hand wave it, but like it follows the themes and it strengthens the themes well because it's a show about love and love conquering death.
Exactly. Right. And like,
yeah, I
still like One Direct Priority because it has themes, right? It has things it wants to talk about, you know, as opposed to like Madoka, which again, don't get me wrong, I love Madoka. I think it's a great narrative. I also think it just means nothing. Because
I think
so here's the thing. Madoka is kind of similar. It's about this struggle between hope and despair, but because of the way that it is written and it continually undermines itself, it doesn't take a stance on whether you should have hope or not, which I think is kind of a I don't know, kind of a bummer thing to say, really. Just be like, I think both sides have some points, hope and despair.
Yeah, I would say that. I would probably, at least in comparison to Wonder Egg Priority, take away what you said about Madoka in that episode, which is like the overall message is that you ought to treat these young women kinder, because you don't know what kind of effect that will have when when you don't, and what kind of ramifications that will have as they grow up. And that's certainly the episode, the message with Wonder Egg Priority is that these girls are saving each other by helping each other and being friends with each other. And likewise, Ai's mom is like an example of like the understanding mom, and she's trying to do her best with Ai as well, and that is what makes Ai realize she just wants to see her mom again and not go through with the I don't know, dying.
I loved the way that they handled it in the last episode, where you have Ai talking to Koito and you have Ai talking to Ai to be like you miss your mom, right?
Yeah.
And like for an entire show that has been so rough and traumatic the entire way through, like such a rocky ride for all the characters, that like singular moment of Ai kind of confronting like suicide and the people in her life, including herself, right? And having her say like, you regret it, don't you? Right? Like you wanted to continue to live. Like that actually does have a legitimate emotional impact. I legitimately did get emotional while watching that. And I think it was a really good way of kind of wrapping that aspect of the show up. I just really don't understand this whole robot girl thing. There's just, I don't want to harp on it like that much, but really, like, what the fuck?
I will hold out hope, because we haven't seen the actual ending of the story, that they will at least address it. I don't have like full confidence that they'll address it in a way that will make me feel satisfied, but they made a decision, and we could talk about Wonder Egg Priority for much longer, but we really have to wrap up now. It is so late. Where did the time go? Talking about anime.
Oh my god.
We knew this episode would be chunky because we watched a ton of stuff, and a lot of stuff came out. So
yeah. I will say, this was a great season. This was an amazing season of anime. There were some hiccups and some kind of revelations about how fragile the industry itself is and how unsustainable it is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird to say that at the end of that, like, hey, the anime was good. Like,
oh yeah.
Like, yes, the anime was good, but also like, what's more important is like the health of the people who make the anime, right?
The
like,
human cost of it.
The human cost of making it, right? Like, it's 100% a caveat that we do have to address as anime consumers, right? It's like, it's one of those things, right, where it feels like you don't really know what you can do. I mean, there are things you can do, like you can donate to like the project that keeps young animators like housed and stuff. But yeah, like it's so hard to make industry-wide change on an individual level. And like kind of sometimes all you can do is just raise awareness to make sure people know about it. And that's like, it feels like such a lame cop-out answer. It's like, oh, you see the environment, all you gotta do is make people more aware of it. The government, all you gotta do is make people more aware of it. I mean, but sometimes, like, really, like, what do you do as just a human being trying to avoid your mortal doom?
It does start there. It does start with at least knowing the problem, and then raising an effort to address it.
But yeah, as you can tell from the length of this episode, So really, really good season.
Yeah.
I just was not expecting to even talk about the stuff we talked about at the beginning for so long. Jeez, oh my god. Every part of this was so long. I hope you enjoy 3-hour-long podcast episodes.
We'll try to trim it down a little bit.
I'll do my best. Anyway, why don't we wrap up? Who are you? Where can we find you on the internet?
I am Renu, also known as Swan. You can find me on Twitter and Twitch and Tumblr, all at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I have started playing Monster Hunter Rise on stream, so that's been fun.
Nice.
Also continuing commission artwork, so if you want to come over for some art and some games, you can find me there every Friday evening.
Very cool.
Yep.
Very cool.
What about you?
You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. My general preoccupation will be streaming once I have got everything in my room sorted again. So in like a week or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I am probably going to be starting a couple games. I don't know what order I'm going to do this in, but I am going to start a couple of streams. One is going to be obviously, of course, of Yakuza Kiwami 2. And like obviously I need to continue the Yakuza game so I can get to the latest ones. And the other game I wanted to do was play Disco Elysium, which just got its
oh my god,
final cut release, which I hear is very
I wanted
good.
to play that too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a friend very graciously gift it to me to play on stream.
That's
so
fun.
I will keep my word and I will play it on stream.
Nice.
And I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And the last stream I wanted to do was I'm going to start a weirdly I'm going to start another Dark Souls stream. But this time I'm going to be playing Dark Souls 3 essentially like all the way through in co-op, and that's going to be super fun. We're going to do some wacky shit. So that's in the works, but yeah, stay tuned. Obviously I have the Discord server for my stream, so you can get all the latest updates on when streams are happening. You can catch us every Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, which is my time. And yeah, we play Ace Attorney. We're on the second case of the second game, and it's going interestingly. We have definitely screwed up a lot.
We got wrecked.
We got wrecked. But that's fun. Sometimes I guess this is disaster striking. But yeah, absolutely. Just stay tuned. Watch us tune in every Saturday. Watch us there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So our opening is by Sk8 Network, and our ending is by Takuma Kara. And the patrons we are thanking this month, or this episode, I suppose I should say, are Evan Williams, Cherubel, Magpie Mirror Test, Frostfall, Sean Dow, Clara West, Undead Uncanny, and Dylan Boats. Thank you so much for your support.
Wow, thank you.
You do keep the Funimation videos rolling, and I don't know if that's a good thing. It might be.
I don't know if you should phrase it like that.
You keep the crunchies rolling.
No.
All right.
They're trying to support us.
Yeah.
Not corporations.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah.
We really do appreciate the support.
Yeah.
And we will see you next time.
See you next time.
た明日ね。